So we'll hereby call the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Project Plan Citizen Oversight Committee for February 16th to order. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if we could move to roll call.
Okay. Lorraine Koss.
Here.
Charles Venuto.
Here.
Vinnie Toronto.
Here.
Don Dice.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
Terry Castro is not here. Bobby Putnam is not here. Laura Lee Thompson. Here. Stephanie Ely.
Here.
Kimberly Newton, not here. Todd Swingle.
Here.
Kurt Smith.
Here.
Barbara Wall-Scanlon.
Here.
Eric Manas.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next item is approval of the agenda. Any modifications?
I move to approve the agenda as published.
Okay. Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. We have an agenda. Next is approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. We'll move on to progress reports. Virginia.
I want to start with a quick,
Turn the mic on.
come over here where I'm supposed to be anyway. I just wanted to start with a quick sort of weather progress-y kind of report. This is an El Nino spring, which means warm and wet. We had 9 to 10 inches across the lagoon in January, which is highly unusual. And so, warm, wet weather tends to encourage blooms. And so this could be a rough spring, but hopefully we have done more to prepare for that. So this is you've seen these images before. The left side, the left panel is what the actual 2011 super bloom looked like. So the hotter colors are the more intense blooms in the lagoon. And then the next 5 panels represent if we, what the nutrients in the lagoon, what kind of blooms would have been anticipated during warm, wet, bloom-intensive kind of weather. And so you see it's very similar to what actually happened in 2011. And then as you move across the chart, it's if we've reduced the load by 25% of our load reduction goals, 50% of our load reduction goals, 75%, and 100%. So where are we currently? The blue arrow sort of tells you we have currently between Save Our Lagoon projects and previous BMAP projects and everybody's projects collectively, we're around 40% now. So we're not quite halfway across the chart there. And then from our thermometer, we've been telling you where are we in terms of load reductions achieved, right, for completed projects versus all the projects that we have underway. So with all the projects underway, we're 70 to 75% towards meeting those load reduction goals. So, will this be enough to get us through an El Nino season? Don't know, but that's just, I just wanted to share kind of, that's where we are. And hopefully the system will flip to La Nina early like the forecasters expect, but it could be a rough spring.
Virginia, for those playing at home, what does TMDL mean?
Total maximum daily load. So the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus loads that the lagoon can assimilate without having bad impacts to ecology.
Thank you.
Good prompt.
Laura Lee?
Okay, so,
Okay, Virginia.
Why is southern Mosquito Lagoon in the last panel on the right, why is it still yellow?
I don't have a real great answer to that, except that it's shallow and those sediments stir up very easily. And so the loads there are, I think there's a lot of internal cycling. There's not a lot of opportunity for projects, nutrient reduction projects there to even reduce loads. So that makes it a harder system to manipulate.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but there's not much going into it either. So, I mean, when you
Right,
look at
and-
how the seagrass came
And
back over the summer.
seagrass
that-
has recovered quite well there this year, 40% return. So, yeah, it's a very dynamic
Interesting.
And a
system.
quick question on that. Do we know what natural would have been? Because, I mean, to your point, some of these are just natural systems cycling as well, right? So that might be, but I don't know that you need to do a big effort on it, but just a benchmark or a basis that might be helpful.
Could I ask a quick question? The 50% TMDL, we haven't achieved that yet. So obviously, that's a model projection of what a 50% TMDL would be. That's not the measurement of what we have right now. Do you understand? I want to make sure everybody understands. Those aren't reflecting what we're really seeing in the lagoon right now. Those are the projections based on TMDL loading. Those are not real images taken from, we haven't gotten to 50% yet, so how could we possibly have an image of what it would look like? So those are projections. So when you're asking, well, that doesn't match up with what I'm seeing, it's because those are projections, okay? Just wanted to make sure we were clear on that.
Yep, thank you. And last thing I'd like to add too is, one, I think this is great, giving some advance notice and communications. I think it would be very helpful to ensure that this is kind of some of our messaging that's going on too, because we've had some good conditions and we've gotten a lot of feedback on clarity, and I think in a lot of people's minds that'll be that we're there and then this happens and it's that now things aren't working, that it's taken a step back, and in reality we're in these cyclical modes. And if we can prep people that we really have a good handle on what's happening out there, and it is cyclical, but this, I think, is very helpful information for people to, if they're preparing, hey, this could be a rough year, then but we're still making the progress. And the important piece is that if it's a rough year, it's not as rough a year as it might have been. So working that into our messaging to be proactive on our communications and connecting with folks so that they know, we're moving the needle. It's not where we want to be, but we're moving the needle.
Thank you. All right.
One more step.
Oh, I'm sorry. When Laura Lee raised her issue, I had a question too. So would muck removal help in the mosquito lagoon? Is that part of what's happening there?
There are natural sediments that are very fine and are easily stirred up. So while there may be some muck, and muck removal generally helps, I think there's a natural tendency of that system to have high turbidity. Okay. But then it's shallow, so it also settles down quickly. And so, seagrass has been able to have a good year in 2023.
Great, thank you.
All right. I also wanted to mention the legislative session. The much-awaited statewide stormwater rule has been moving through committees, and hopefully that will get ratified this year, and that will significantly increase the amount of stormwater treatment that has to happen on development sites to reduce future loads of pollution to the lagoon. The $100 million grant program for the Indian River Lagoon that the governor requested and the legislature funded last year The governor requested that that be recurring. Currently, there is $100 million in the House appropriations bill. There's $25 million in the Senate appropriations bill, and they've kicked the decision to the conference committee. So we'll see what happens with that. Also, we had submitted a number of individual project requests. The sum of funding for those in the House bill is $5.2 million and $0 in the Senate bill. So we're hoping that we will do better in the conference bill for our projects. This is quarterly report, a quarterly report month, so I'm going to skip most of the monthly progress report, but just hit on a couple highlights that aren't part of what Anthony is going to present. Anthony's covering for Terry Breeden today. On grant applications, we submitted a proposal to the National Estuary Program to start a local pond watch program, working with homeowners associations to monitor their ponds and talk about what allows pollution to get into their pond and what sort of practices could reduce the amount of pollution in their pond. We have over 4,000 HOA stormwater ponds in Brevard County. So we're hoping that this is going to help improve the maintenance of those private systems that we have very little authority or control over. So the National Estuary Program approved our grant request, and Melanie also submitted an application to National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to help supplement this new program. So we're waiting to hear the results of that request. But next month, our plan is to sort of focus on stormwater, BMPs, and our program ideas for how to roll this out, share that with you next month.
We have a question on that. Orly?
On that citizen science, I think that's great. That's fantastic. But would that roll over into municipalities using citizens to monitor municipal stormwater ponds also?
Could it?
I think our pilot program is focused on HOAs. Once we get that going, I don't see any problem with, allowing other citizen scientists into the program. We'll have to work on equipment and lab costs and all those sorts of things. But yeah, we hope to expand this program going forward. This first year will be a small pilot while we get all the logistics worked out.
Pleased to see you doing that. Thank you.
The 2024 Save Our Indian River Lagoon project plan that you all recommended is going to the County Commission on February 20th. The ordinance says that it will be presented by the chair in coordination with a natural resources staff. Your chair has a conflict. I've always been in the box and presented those on behalf of the committee, but Vinnie, as the vice chair, will be there to answer any questions that the board may have.
Yep.
Is there anything y'all want to say
So
about it?
apologize, I can't be there. I have a work conflict, but thanks, Vinnie, for covering for me, and Virginia for taking the lead on giving the actual presentation. But we'll, tag team it, and that way we've got the representation from the committee as well as from staff.
Okay,
I
super.
just think this is a thank you for me making you be chair. So you're welcome, Todd.
Absolutely.
All right, and then near the bottom of the work underway this month list, there's the Titusville Causeway Multi-Trophic Restoration Project. That project has gone to bid openings. We're in the process of reviewing the bids, but we've got a good proposal, and so there's a small amount of Save Our Lagoon funding going to shoreline planting as a part of that project, but it's really a $3.5 million nearshore wave break with seagrass, with clams, with a whole lot of other stuff going on along that shoreline. So years of work to
Okay.
make that happen.
Virginia, Vinny has a
Is there going to
question.
be a video on that one? That, to me, sounds like a great video piece because it's a combination of so many different solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Last month, we talked about a lot of opportunities for community events. So there's a lot of them listed there. We welcome any of you to help us work tables at especially the Melbourne Beach Environmental Day or Brevard Zoo's World Seagrass Day or the Thousand Islands Fest. You know, the more people we have at the booth, the more of the public we can talk to. So you had asked to let you know, and so those are great opportunities if you have the ability to come help us out. And then the last thing I wanted to say was the Indian River Lagoon Symposium that's put on each year by Harbor Branch. It will be next week, February 22nd and 23rd. Registrations to attend the event live have been full for quite some time, but there's also an online live stream available. And I think we mentioned this last time, if you want to just go for the poster session, you can do that, but you still have to register in advance to get through the gate. And that's my monthly report.
Okay, thank you. Move on to monthly revenue graph and financial statements.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
So for November, we had collections of 4.2 million. We had collections for November at 4.2 million. So that puts us at 366 million so far in the program. And for the monthly statement, we have total assigned 10 million in revenues. And for expenditures, we have 53 million assigned and 6.7 million in actuals. And here's our Q1 financial table. And our grants, Q1. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. I just do want to continue to highlight the good work on securing grants. I mean, that's you know, that is truly in keeping with the vision of when this fund was originally approved, is being able to leverage the commitment of having a program in place. And I think this is probably one of the best examples I've seen of that really coming to fruition, so.
All right, I'm going to touch on the quarterly progress report. I'll be doing a PowerPoint, but it'll correspond with the progress report table. And the highlights in yellow represent the progress made in the quarter from October 1st to December 31st.
And what does the red mean?
No progress.
Nope.
Okay.
No change since the last quarter.
All right.
Well, on that note, what does the yellow mean?
Yellow means there has been progress.
So if I see a complete in yellow, that means we completed it this reporting period.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So for the public education projects, we have 7 projects. 1 is complete, 6 are underway. The fertilizer and septic maintenance campaigns are 83% complete. We've also worked with the Lagoon Loyal Engagement campaign this last quarter. So everyone should check out the latest Lagoon Loyal newsletter where we're kicking off a Pledge for Prizes campaign. And this month's participants who have completed a 5-question pledge are eligible to win a 2-hour kayak or stand-up paddleboard tour. So check your emails for the Lagoon Loyal newsletter. And Brandon confirmed it's still active, that campaign right now, so if you want to do the pledge. The irrigation and stormwater best management practices campaigns have started, and we have been working on the baseline surveys. Those are in draft still, but should be complete soon. We do have an RFQ that should be advertised shortly for the continuation of the public education campaigns. So the Restore Our Shores project is currently 35% complete, and they're continuing the work with the oyster, clam, and seagrass gardening, outreach, and reef building.
Can we go back to the septic maintenance? What is involved with that exactly?
So it's an education campaign to teach people how to properly care for their septic systems, how not to abuse them. You know, don't flush a bunch of bleach down there or drive on your drain field, things like that that would cause your septic system to fail early or not operate efficiently and potentially increase groundwater pollution.
So how do you reach out to these people?
So
Yeah, so we're working a few different ways to get out to the public. So we work with all the realtors in the area. We have flyers that they distribute to anyone who's purchasing a house. So the realtors, the title companies, and the inspectors all are getting these flyers. We just reprinted up some more to replenish the ones that they had handed out last year. So whenever they have a house that's on septic that they're selling or inspecting or writing a lien on, or a mortgage on, they can hand these out so that the new homeowner knows how to properly maintain their septic. We're also working with the septic maintenance companies that come out and do the pump outs, so they have magnets we produce that they can hand out to their customers, so it gives them the different things they can do to help maintain their septic until the next time that they have their clean out. And then we have general outreach that we do with many of our other things where we have our ads on social media, Google, stuff like that, and we produced 4 different septic commercials that are running on various platforms, whether it's the little commercials you see when you watch a video online, or ones that we have Hulu as part of it too. So if you have ads with your Hulu subscription, you might see one of our septic commercials pop up there. I was playing a game the other day and the little ad that pops up there, we got a Lagoon Loyal one, so it's all around.
Well, the reason I asked is because obviously I've said it a zillion times, I have a septic system. And I get it pumped out every 3 or 4 years just because. But I've never had the company that pumps it out ever give me any information. And I'm not on social media much, so I can't comment on that. But it's extremely important because most people have no clue.
Yeah, and
When they buy a house that already has septic, out of sight, out of mind, they don't care. Until it starts backing up in their house, they don't even know it's there. Right. You flush the toilet and everything's fine. Even if the thing's leaking, they don't know it's leaking.
Right.
So that's why I asked.
Yeah, we reached out to all the septic companies we could find in the area, and it's voluntary if they wanted to distribute those or not. So as many as would take our magnets, we've sent them to them. So, and the ones who did accept them have asked for more. They said they're loving handing them out. So.
Do you have those materials when you vend? You go to events? Do you have the septic information out?
We've brought, the septic flyers. We've brought those out to the,
Good. Well, whatever you're doing, you can't do enough. It's a thankless part of the job because, trying to reach people that don't care, and don't even know.
Right.
It's a big job.
And people are busy with their lives, and like you said, until it's a problem, it's not a worry.
If you get us your contractor's name, we can do an extra outreach to them.
I would never give them free. I would never give SOS free advertising.
So I know we have to be careful on recommendations, but is there a way, is it something that we could do that perhaps on the page is to highlight the logos and names of the companies that have agreed to distribute that information? because to me, that's, as long as you clarify that they've agreed to partner with the education campaign, then you're starting to create a better alignment on the incentives that they have with what we're looking to achieve. So for me, if we could have a page that says these septic companies have agreed to participate in our education campaign, that's one more avenue to connect with the public, because a lot of people don't even know where to go to find a
Yeah, I think
company to
that's a
help
great
do
idea.
those, so.
And it gives them motivation because they're getting free publicity.
Exactly.
Absolutely, it's a huge motivation to get more participation.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, if we can add that in.
You're okay, Todd, I don't care what Vinnie says.
He does all the work, I just have to try to sit here and look pretty.
I do,
Yes.
I do think that realtors are beginning to inspect septics every time they have a sale.
Awesome.
And we are giving information, most of us, on how to maintain a septic system. So,
That's good.
yeah, I mean, that's good news, because we didn't do that always, and now we're really promoting that.
In agreement with that, we see that on our end. The realtors and homeowners that are shopping are inquiring about the septic systems and the sewer laterals. So especially when they're buying older homes.
Great.
All right, so for the next group of projects, we have the wastewater treatment facility upgrades. So we have 8 projects, 4 are complete. So that includes the Cocoa Beach Wharf, the Palm Bay Wharf, and the Ticeville Osprey Wharf, which they were actually 2 phases to that project. The Rockledge facility is currently under construction and 68% complete. This quarter, they installed an equalization basin, transfer pump station, generator, and walkway. So they're making progress. We also have 3 wastewater treatment facility projects in the design phase. So Melbourne's Grant Street Wharf has already completed design, and they've been out to bid twice, both in September and December. Both times the bid came in well over budget, so they're going to bid again. They're planning in March. And then the West Melbourne Ray Bullard facility is now 90% complete. And then the South Brevard Wharf is in bid prep. So for the rapid infiltration basin and spray field upgrades, we have the 2 projects. One is complete, the Long Point Park, which was one of the first projects completed in the Sorrel plan. And then we have the uncontracted Sterling House condo project. We've been reaching out to the property owner and also vendor to inquire how to make a partnership and make a successful project. So for the package plant connections, there are 4 package plant projects in the plan, and 1 is complete, Oak Point. And this quarter, the Willow Lakes RV Park contract was executed, and they're already at 50% design completion, so they're moving forward quickly. That picture on the right is of Willow Lakes, and it's up in Mims. We have grant contracts pending for the Cove. So they're interested in upgrading or connecting to sewer, but it's going to be an expensive project, so we're looking for grant funding from the DEP to supplement the Sorrel funding. So for the sewer laterals, we have 6 projects, 4 are complete. The Sally Beach pilot smoke testing, Bearbrook Bay, South Beaches, and Merritt Island smoke testing have all been completed. We have the Osprey Basin smoke testing, which will be in Titusville. So that contract's out for signature, so that should be happening this spring, the summer timeframe. That basin will be smoke tested. The countywide repairs, we have 860 leaky laterals fixed, 295 of them using Sorrel funds. And there has been a slight decrease in the numbers here because we found some duplications in the tracking and how things were recorded. So we've been doing some heavy lifting on our various trackers and our data, making sure it all agrees. So that's changed, and it will continue to change because we do have other homeowner discovered issues. They apply for grants, and we can fund that. And then Osprey, once they do their smoke testing, then we'll have a whole new batch of homeowners that qualify for the grant. On the picture, on the right, we do have one of the examples of a cracked pipe, an older PVC pipe that's been cracked and infiltrated. About once a week, we get another batch of pictures from homeowners. We've received a few for Orangeburg, which is the fiber pipe that's been coated in tar and been outdated for a long time. So people still have those and they're discovering them. So we've fixed a few of those. And
That'll back up your plumbing right there.
that will, for sure. Yeah.
Is that duct tape wrapped around it?
No, I think it's a type of like rubber that was bonding the.
From a repair?
From a repair, yeah. Yeah, this pipe looked like it had been repaired multiple times.
Worked
Yeah.
well.
So for the septic removal projects, we have 47 projects, 4 are complete, 8 are in construction, and 21 are in design. The city of Melbourne has 6 projects underway. And then we, in the county, we have 3 projects in the bidding phase. Zone O was previously bid and came in over budget, so utilities decided to try and bid that with Zone P, and maybe since they're really close, the economies of scale will have a more affordable project. We're also securing grant funding for those to be able to make that construction possible. Zone N has been in bid prep and should hopefully be advertised this year. So we have 2 county projects in construction currently. The Miko sewer line extension is overall 61% complete. As far as the lift station and actual main sewer mains underground, that's at 95% complete. Construction has been paused the last few months because DOT was resurfacing US 1 and they stopped all construction in the right of way. And we also have to wait for FP&L to connect the lift station to power. So we only have 1 connection there. We had to bypass the existing septic system where we put the lift station. But the contractor is itching to keep going, and we're bugging FP&L. For the South Central C project, it's 85% complete overall. All the sewer mains and lift stations are totally complete. They're running, accepting sewage. We have 23 connections completed so far. So we're making progress, and in the next few months, we should have most, if not all, of those connections complete.
What's the total number?
147 total.
You said in the next couple months, complete? Hopefully?
Yeah. The plumber, I heard from the plumber that they could potentially, in about 3 months, they believe, get all of them. So barring any weather delays or staffing changes for them, they're just plugging away at connecting all these homes. Yep. All right, so the remaining contracted septic projects are in various stages of design, and they're making progress. The 4 county park septic sewer projects are moving forward, and we're working on the notice of funding. The Cocoa J&K is, the city is seeking legislative appropriations to make that project feasible. Melbourne withdrew the city of Melbourne and Zone D projects that were in the plan and are revising their septic to sewer program before going to contract for Avenida Del Rio and Bowers. The city of Palm Bay in the last quarter passed a mandatory connection ordinance, and that'll help them move forward with their projects to be able to guarantee connection. The city of Rockledge also plans to move forward with their projects and will likely expand their project area. And then the Titusville is reviewing their Zone H project and might modify the project area.
Just a quick question on that mandatory. Is there anything we can do to kind of highlight that? Because, I mean, that's a huge step for a political body to take. And that is incredibly aligned, and that across the state, that's one of the biggest challenges that occurs for septic to sewer. So, any of the local governments that have done that, once again, on the communications, we need to, anything we can do to give them props on that, because that's huge on the alignment and having that that will to stand out there and put that requirement in place. So whether it's Palm Bay and whoever, anything we can do on our communications to highlight that.
Is Suzanne going to come next month and speak?
We can invite her.
Okay.
I think next month's agenda is quite full, but we can work on her schedule and see when she
Good.
could be available.
Yeah, just explaining that whole program would be really good.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that she was really an effective advocate at the Lagoon meeting, and in other places I've heard her, City Manager Sherman, explaining that this was a tool. She asked her council for a tool that would allow her to go forward and leverage different monies.
Yeah.
State monies, federal monies, this money.
And I have to mention their sustainability board as well, and she's been huge in supporting that and getting it revamped and restocked, and they have a great board for their sustainability outreach as well.
All that's perfect. I mean, anything, because I think, at the end of the day, the more momentum we can create and the easier it is for governments to align with what others are doing and to both out of simplicity of, copying the sincerest form of flattery. So, just, it's easier to get the movement, but it's also knowing that you're just not standing alone.
And they champion the low-impact development, low-impact design, especially in stormwater and
Great.
reclamation. So that's a huge motivator, even from our conference and from U.S. Green Building Council. So there's a lot of components there that they've really connected and organized well. So there's a
Awesome.
lot to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, to speak to that, one of the, what the director told me was the mood was much different from the previous times they tried to pass mandatory connection. The community, in the previous times, the community came out and rallied against it. This time, very little opposition, so it might be a different environment at this point. So for the septic upgrades and quick connect section, on the septic upgrades, the plan has 1,625 proposed projects, and for quick connects, 876. We've been using grant funds to reach out further than what the plan would fund, just based on the prioritization of the plan. This quarter, we received an additional 39 applications for septic upgrades and completed 17 of those, bringing our total up to 229 upgrades. And this quarter, we completed an additional 62 quick connects. Part of the, some of the quick connect numbers have decreased for the same reason of updating the database and realizing we had some duplication in there for, so that number has decreased a little bit. We expect that we'll get another influx of quick connect applications when we receive our new grant that helps allow us to offer more money around countywide. And Palm Bay has also been partnering, and they are waiving connection fees for the homeowners that take part in the Sorrel grant program, so to make it affordable. So for stormwater, we have 240 projects in the plan, 44 are complete. This quarter, the City of Melbourne completed the high school and funeral home baffle box, and the City of Titusville completed the St. John's 2 baffle box. The St. John's River Water Management District's Crane Creek and M1 Canal Flow Restoration Project is under construction and is at 25% complete. There are 16 additional stormwater projects in the design phase, and 3 have design complete and are moving into the bidding phase. So vegetation harvesting, we have 10 projects. 6 are complete, and this quarter, the Cocoa Beach Golf Course Stormwater Pond Harvesting Project was contracted. For the unincorporated countywide vegetation harvesting, it is underway. In total, they've removed 3.6 million pounds of vegetation and 3,800 pounds of total nitrogen. And the pictures here show the before and after for the chain of lakes B pond vegetation harvesting.
That's amazing.
It was really fun watching them harvest it.
Thank
They're really
you.
efficient.
Thank you so much, really. As someone who came to this board for that specific reason and give my time, energy, I have to tell you that's amazing. And I see it as just the beginning of hugeness. I do have to ask, though, that total nitrogen reduction, is that based just on the removal, or is that based on a metric that would include the dissolved compost matter that didn't go into the lake? Because I personally, as someone who's done a lot of study and research in this, I think that's a low number. I think that would be the minimum that was estimated to reduce. So moving forward, I would really like to see something combined in there. I'm not the scientist to do that for you, but I know you know them. So just to add up really what that true number is, I think it's much higher than what that states.
All right, for the muck removal and interstitial treatment, we have 20 projects in the plan and 4 are complete. And we have 3 projects in the construction phase. So currently, the unincorporated Grand Canal project is at 68% complete and has removed 324 cubic yards of muck. The Sykes Creek project has dredged 76,500 cubic yards of muck and is approximately 64% complete. And the DMMA site restoration for the Sykes Creek Phase 2 is underway. The photo on the right is of a red mangrove there. The Atkins has been selected as the consultant for engineering services for the O'Galley Muck project, and the technical bid specifications are almost complete. Indian Harbor Beach and the Satellite Beach projects have received their permits, and then the other dredge projects are in the design phase. So for Oyster.
Quick comment on the muck. The O'Galley Northeast, that's not the O'Galley River.
No.
That's the Indian River Lagoon near the O'Galley River, right?
Correct.
Near the O'Galley Causeway,
Yeah,
north of the
yeah,
O'Galley Causeway.
yeah. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
All right, so in the oyster bars, we have 25 projects in the plan, 9 are complete. The photo on the right shows an oyster cluster, and it was grown from spat-on shell, deployed in July of 2023. So this is at the McNabb Oyster Park Oyster Project, and the scale is in millimeters, so that is a good hand-sized chunk of oysters that have grown. And Brevard Zoo has a variety of oyster bar projects under contract. In this quarter, they installed over 6,000 square feet of oyster bars in the North Indian River Lagoon. This photo on the left shows the oysters growing vertically through the gabions on the Castaway Cove. And the photo on the right shows the oyster spat that have been recruited to oyster cell clutch at the Rainwater Oyster Project 1 month after deployment. So they're out there, they're living. For the planted shorelines, we have 11 projects in the plan, and 8 are complete. Each entity is moving forward with their projects, and the Ticeville Causeway project is currently in the permitting phase and will be contracted soon. So the photo shows red mangroves here at the McNabb Park Shoreline Project, and what to emphasize is that the prop roots are already growing out, it's flowering, it's happy, flourishing. For clam aquaculture, the plan has funding for 10 farmers, and we have 4 active farmers. We received another application for the aquaculture grant just this last week, so there's still interest and still trying to move forward with that. So as the overview, we're now up to 257,000 pounds of total nitrogen reduction per year and 15,000 pounds of total phosphorus reduction. We have received 169 scopes of work, 168 contracts have been executed, and we now have 88 projects complete. So here are the updated thermometers showing the project construction complete on the left, in the middle, the total nitrogen and phosphorus removed or prevented, and on the right, the trust funds collected or spent. Any other questions? Terry?
Yeah, great job. The spreadsheet is great, but this is a much more effective way to kind of tell the story. So I don't know if there's a way to do both or put the spreadsheet in the background or something for those of us, those others of you that would like to go through all those cells. I had a question on breeze swept. One of the first projects that we did, FIT, weren't they doing water quality monitoring before and after?
Applied Ecology did. And she presented to the COC a few years ago, so that we might have that clipped and available.
Well, I knew we touched on it at some point, so I mean, it seems to me that's a data point that we ought to be sort of emphasizing in our campaign here. I don't remember the exact numbers. I think there was an improvement. Is there further improvement, or?
So there was improvement, that was the first project, and the monitoring dollars, Rockledge had that project moving as Swirl was approved, and so we moved very quickly to provide Swirl dollars to fund some monitoring to measure pre versus post, but the construction was already underway by the time the wells went in, so the pre is not pure pre. And the post, we really didn't know what timing to collect that data. And so by the time the first collections happened, like the nitrogen was it was gone. So we don't know how quickly it reduced. So we now have, we used that trial to shape the monitoring that we've been doing at some of the other projects, septic sewer projects that Anthony just presented. And so Indian River Isles, we have 5 years of monthly pre-data, and we are now collecting, during and post data as those connections happen. Also, Miko, we have 4 years of monthly pre-construction data, and we'll be comparing, monthly. We also changed the scope on Miko to do 2-week intervals after connections. So we're trying to zoom in on, how much those loads go down and how quickly they go down.
How long after completion would you continue that monitoring?
Maybe up to a year. I mean, we want to see how quickly it goes down, and then does it stay down? But, the data is what we've seen in the 4 to 5 years that we've been collecting that data, it is highly variable. So we want to make sure that it doesn't go down and then bounce right back up. We need to make sure that we're, in order to statistically say that it's gone down, we're going to have quite a bit of post-connection data to say that, this is definitely different than all this variability in the pre-connection.
But you would expect the minimums after completion would be a lot lower than the minimums, the variable minimums before construction. So
the minimums may be a little bit lower, but the maximums and the medians and the means are what's, really changes. But you've got to have a longer period of time to be able to demonstrate that.
So we'll see that data sometime when you start completing it. Thank you.
So Virginia, just back to the septic maintenance education. I'm sorry, education is so important to me. I think we're doing a great job on that. The one piece that might be missing, although the messaging might need to be tweaked, is the home builders. Like, I know we're talking about the realtors, which is great for when you buy a home, but with all the development that is going on in this area, I don't know. And every time I talk to a developer, they say, I'm doing everything I can for the lagoon. And I think they feel they are, and they believe it. So I didn't know if there was a message we could team onto that septic maintenance to also do the home builders, because if somebody buys a piece of land, they may not deal with a realtor when it comes to the septic, but they should know about the importance of it and the maintenance, which I know it's required if you do in advance. But even NSF treatment, NSF 245 can vary from 50% nitrogen reduction to 80. So if your home builder is going at the minimum, it's only, it's only 50% of the nitrogen being reduced. So I think there might be some education in there we could work with the home builders on.
Just a note on that, it may be an easier route rather than trying to figure out which home builders are building where septics are. Everything's going to either come through your building permit or your Department of Health for permitting the septic. And so to hit that front end new installation, that may be a little simpler touch point to get at what Vinny's talking about.
And I just think it's friendlier than saying, here's the regs, now go do something. It's like, here's the regs and here's why. And if you really care about the lagoon, maybe go for those 80% reduction tanks as opposed to the 50 that meet code.
I wanted to revisit the mechanical harvesting for just a brief moment. One, I think we should highlight that for the community. There's such a push in our community to discontinue spraying of all the herbicides, and that is such a great example. And then for some people who may not connect the dots, the mechanical harvesting prevents the muck. So instead of creating the muck that we're going in there and talking about, are we or are we not using these funds correctly to do that and to remove the muck, the mechanical harvesting just alleviates that whole situation, or at least mitigates it to an exorbitant amount. So I think that's something that definitely needs community correspondence and to really highlight that that's moving. And that's just such a great example and a beautiful idea all around. So really all of our priority points are hit from that one project.
And maybe off Kimberly's point, and I don't know if we could calculate how much muck is saved from removing and actually add that to the table or the plan. You know, like the harvesting has removed this much nitrogen, but it's also prevented this much decay. And I think that would drive home the point that the harvesting is also a muck project because it's stopping it from being created. I don't know, Virginia, the science, and we do have Dr. Fox here who may be able to help us with that, but I think it's such a dual purpose.
And to that point as well, to educate the decision makers, the municipalities, the other entities that are funding different projects, and to prioritize the mechanical harvesting and to get that funding approved on those levels is key. And I know there's a lot that want to do it, but they just don't know how. They don't have the numbers or the resources to prove that it's actually a worthwhile investment and a preventative measure.
And just a quick note on that, I'd caution us about adding it to the plan specifically, because I think we've got a lot of complex data already, and staff trying to keep up with that is going to be challenging. But I think the piece that I would recommend is, you know, there's a lot on the, as it translates into the communication and some storyboarding and telling it in the context of that people connect, because like those are big numbers, but what do they mean? And so, you know, I do a lot on water conservation. We'll put it into how many pools that is. And so translating some of our impact into things that may connect with what people see every day, I think may be helpful to really, to just connect with folks better. So for me, I'd recommend we deal with it more on the communications front rather than specifically in the plan. And then the other piece of that is everything that we're putting out is in years. It's pounds per year. But you're really getting a significant cumulative effect now. I think showing some cumulative totals may also further communicate how this is amplifying over time. Because, you know, these are additive. It's like if it's 200,000 this year, well, it's 400,000 by the time it's next year, and then it's 600,000. It's, you know, that total and that really does get back into the muck conversation as well, because it's those things that become these pervasive sources. We're really keeping those out of the lagoon. Yeah. So that cumulative effect is really, really impactful.
And Todd, in my conversations, you mentioned the swimming pool as an example. People don't grasp what is a ton of nitrogen.
Yeah.
They don't get that. They don't get the muck. They don't get the actual spatial recognition of what that means. So as communications are created, use a swimming pool. This is how many swimming pools of muck were taken out.
Yeah, we use that on our storyboard already, so I think we're up to like
I'm so sorry, I
184
did not know
Olympic-sized swimming pools of muck removed.
Where is that exactly?
On the storyboard, underneath our maps section on the website.
Yeah.
So Save Our Indian River Lagoon storyboard, the section on muck says how many Olympic-sized swimming pools we've removed of muck, I think.
And I know, Abby's translated muck into, how many school buses, and so we've tried different, how many shuttle crafts, how many.
To my point, I love all of that, and I'm very avid about looking at our communications on a somewhat regular basis. And so if I've missed it, I would have to say that, bump it up to the top, put it in a meme, do something else to get that work put in front of people's eyes. If it's already been created, push it out there. It is really relevant.
Maybe if you're doing ads with the thermometer, you could do a GIF, an animated GIF with like school buses driving by, with, with the thermometer or something.
Or dump trucks taking it
Yeah,
away
dump trucks taking it away.
from the lagoon to,
Yeah.
well, then that might be a can of worms, though. Sorry.
Space shuttles, I like that one.
Yeah, here's
Launching
the-
it into space.
Not this weekend.
Yeah, so here's where you can find it on our website under the map section. It's the first story map on there. You know, if you go in there, it's a reminder. So it has all the various infographics. So all the details we talked about. So there's the,
Yeah, I believed you, it was in there. I thank you for showing me, but again, just take that screenshot and throw it out there. You know, it's something that resonates. People understand that, you know, if they don't have a swimming pool, they're in their neighbors, so they get that.
And, go
Just
ahead.
one other question on the vegetation harvest. The figures that you presented removed, was that dry weight or wet weight?
yeah,
Probably wet.
Yeah, I think the vegetation removed was partially dried, wet way, by the time, so it has to pass the filter test before the truck can drive to the landfill, right? And then it gets weighed as it enters the landfill. So that's the trip ticket weight in the truck at that point. But then the nitrogen reduction, the TN reduction, is based on subsamples of that going to the lab and being dried and processed, and how much of that is actually nitrogen.
Just taking, what Kimberly's saying, if you wanted to figure out the correlation between muck prevented, I think is what you're saying. If you had some dry weight figures, there might be some algorithm. I'm sure it varies between where you get it from and the time of year, but there might be something there that's of interest.
And
Yeah,
vegetation
You'll get some
varies,
of that, you may get some of that in Dr. Fox's presentation.
And
So
there's
a
so
lot of
much-
variability in the.
There's so much more than just the nitrogen. There's the carbon sequestration. There's so many other aspects to that project that expand beyond just what you see at face value, as great as that picture is.
So we do have the table added in the plan of, other benefits of these projects that Dr. Windsor worked on in the past. So if there are other things that you're thinking of that you want highlighted in that table, that's a real good place to put it.
And of course, this one has real social value because it's another social amenity.
I just want to highlight, we're throwing all kinds of ideas at you, and just to emphasize that, one, the team and the communications that have been done have been fabulous. And I think people are getting excited about it and continuing to think about just how to connect more. And so take all of these as just tweaks rather than, redirects, because the team's done a fabulous job on these. And, I think for me, the piece, and we saw a lot of it's there, it's just that question of how do we continue to get more and more traction and visibility and connectability out of it. So I think you've got the vast majority of what you need already there, and it's that continual improvement process, so.
Well, I agree, and I think their great work has proved to create more opportunities. So I think it's because of the fact they've done such great work to create that these opportunities to expand just keep being there for us. So
Well, no
I
good
agree.
deed
Thank
goes
you.
unpunished, but also when it comes to
Exactly.
messaging, you've got to constantly tweak, because how many times have you seen the same commercial on TV and you're like, oh, and you just tune it off. So just finding where that needle point is every time is awesome.
Okay, thank you.
all right.
Okay, I think we are on to other reports and special presentations. So we have internal nutrient cycling. Dr. Fox.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me, and it is so encouraging to hear these conversations and to come back and hear the progression of the conversations. So I really do appreciate the work that you all are doing. And so thank you for inviting me back. I'm here to talk about internal nutrient cycling, benthic fluxes from muck, and I'm throwing in here other sediments from the Indian River Lagoon. So I won't get too much time to talk about those other sediments, but just I think that's something important to keep in mind. And so one of the reasons I'm here is Dr. John Treffry, and so I have to thank him, right, my co-author on this, and we've spent a lot of time over the past many years working towards this paper, and this is the culmination of a whole bunch of studies in the lagoon. And so I'm going to kind of walk through some of the things we've learned putting this together. One of those is defining muck, right? You're all familiar with what muck is, but let's revisit some of those definitions as we start to compare the ways that we're identifying where it is and what it is. Once we've identified it, then we can look at the benthic fluxes from it. And so we've learned a lot more about the variation in fluxes from place to place. And so we're improving those tools that we have to estimate the total loading that's coming from muck based on those new locating techniques. And so once we have the surface area, we have the fluxes, we can start to look at the total internal nutrient loading from those muck deposits, and we can start to compare the internal loading versus external and make some better estimates as to the total impact of muck. And from there, just a brief comment on the contribution of muck deposits to algal blooms and how this may contribute to these regime shift, or the regime shift that we've seen, this new stable state that we're seeming to be stuck in. And then potentially other consequences. So defining muck. Right? In 1987, John Treffry published a paper that gave this definition: muck is black, fine-grained sediments with a high water content composed of partially decomposed organic matter, going back to the aquatic weed harvesting, right? And considerable amounts of admixed silt and clay materials. That's a very qualitative definition, right? If you talk to the public, that's what you're going to hear muck is, right? It's this black, gooey stuff. Shortly thereafter, 1990, John Treffry published this paper giving some boundaries, right, or some actual quantitative definitions to muck. So it is black sediments. If you have a Munsell soil chart, it's color 5Y3-2. It's a dark color, right? But we actually have some ways to define this stuff. 50% water by weight, 75% water by volume, which is really interesting, right? Muck is actually mostly water, just an interesting thing to keep in mind. And that we'll revisit that in a few minutes. 60% of the solids are silt and clay-sized particles, and then 10% of the solids are organic matter, right? And so this, I think, is a definition that you're all aware of, right? But all of a sudden, when we start to go to locate muck, and so and just before I move on, right, the organic content is a primary variable that is used in broad surveys, and that was published by John Treffry in 1990. And so we aren't necessarily measuring all of these variables everywhere because they're all really nicely correlated, right? And so we can do broad surveys looking at something simple as organic content. And so in the 1990 study, they used probing, right? They poked the mud with a stick, and that actually helps them to locate where it is, right? It's a calibrated stick. It actually takes quite a bit of effort to do this right. And so this is just a picture above the water, right? And to make sure we're getting this right, we actually throw on a scuba tank. They push me off the boat, and I go watch that stick go in. And it is incredible to actually watch and help people calibrate their ability to detect this stuff, right? The hardest thing to actually do is find the surface sometimes, because you can't feel where that transition is between the water and that fluidized muck. And so we work really hard to calibrate those numbers. Two things we do, right? We send a scuba diver down to watch, and then we also use a flat disc that just gravity, it won't actually settle in, and we measure how deep that is, and we calibrate that poking at a regular interval. But how does this compare to that quantitative definition, right? It pokes with a stick. Is that the same as that quantitative definition? And so we can start to take some samples and make comparisons. And so this is just a subset of the overall data. And what I'm showing you here is probe penetration in feet. I know that's a weird unit to some of us, right? That's about a shoe, right? But if we have less than about a shoe thickness, right? If the probe goes in by less than that much, right, 30 centimeters or about a foot, it is not likely to have enough porosity, and porosity is a fancy word for water content by volume, right? And so if it doesn't go in more than a foot, it's not likely to actually fit within that definition of muck. Same thing for the organic content. In places where we can probe and the probe goes in by less than about 30 centimeters, we're not seeing the composition fitting within that quantitative definition of muck. And so we're starting to have some tools, and this is very abbreviated to fit into 15 minutes, right, that we can actually start to connect all of these definitions, that kind of qualitative to the quantitative to the poking. And so from those kind of calibrated poking, right, we start to make these muck maps. And so again, each of these sites, we've taken real samples and we've compared the probing to those quantitative definitions, and we've done this a lot, right? So we've gone out and poked and poked and poked and poked, right? And we have thousands of data points. And so it's really impressive to look at these little maps, and then we put it on this picture of the lagoon, and all of a sudden you're like, where to go, right? It is a big lagoon. There's 400 square kilometers of surface area when we look at Mosquito, Banana, Indian River lagoons, and we've probed a lot of it, right? But it would just be virtually impossible to probe every single square inch of it. And so are there tools available that can help us to figure out where to go and where to look? And so zooming in on one of the areas, right, you can see quite a few of the little spots that we've poked. But I want to point out, I don't know if this mouse works, you can see some just pure dark areas here, right? And so this is one where the muck is pretty well defined. You get to the edges and the muck stops. There are other areas up here where you see this nice gradient of colors, and it just kind of transitions from muck to the other sediments without this really defined change. And so I apologize for my bad cartoon, but this is just trying to illustrate that the physical forces, right, waves, things like waves are going to move sediments around, and they're going to fractionate based on grain size. The smaller the grains, the more easily resuspended they are, and so they're going to go to the lowest energy environments. And in the lagoon, we have kind of two of these types of environments. We have the discrete things like borrow pits where we took sand to build causeways, and we see muck accumulating in those because down in that deep little spot, we have protection from wave energy, right? We're accumulating the fine sediments. We also have, and so what I'm pointing out here, my little red bar there, is representing what I'm calling the distance between the surface of the muck and the sand. And if we look at that distance between the surface of the muck and the adjacent sand, I'm calling it the relief, I apologize. It's much smaller, right? There's very little relief, and you may not actually see a difference in the depth between the muck and the adjacent sand, or not very much. And so we've defined these based on some of the geological literature as discrete deposits or continuous, right? So those discrete things are little, well-defined areas, and the continuous are things that are going to expand widely. Kurt?
I have a question. Which of those would you say describe the channel?
So the ICW, in theory, could be a little bit of both. It depends on where you are. So you'll see coming up that in kind of the Melbourne to Rockledge area, the whole lagoon is deep, and there's not really a defined channel because they didn't really dredge much because it's naturally deep there. And when you get into other areas like some of Banana, it's very clearly identified, and the channel falls more in the discrete. But generally, the difference, that relief between the channel and the adjacent sand, is not as much as in some of the other dredged deposits.
The reason I ask is because probably 20 years ago, there was some kind of a symposium here in Melbourne. And I remember one of the speakers was from, I believe, the Army Corps of Engineers. And he said that if he could get somebody to give him a permit, and if he could dredge the entire Indian River, the entire intercoastal waterway in Florida, he said, particularly here in Brevard County, I could buy you guys 20 years to fix all your other problems, because that's where it all kind of sits. And then when you have storms, it gets dispersed again. And then the process starts again. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. So I was wondering which one of those. So I get what you're saying, because of the topography does change, because like between the Ogalla River and Pineda, it's pretty deep. So it's probably more like a continuous. But as you go further south, it's probably more defined. But I just thought that was very interesting what he said. It made a lot of sense.
No, and I think that's exactly something we need to be thinking about, right, is taking advantage of that ICW.
And we encourage Florida Inland Navigation District and the Army Corps to consider that, to do that, to incorporate interstitial treatment when they do that, but we haven't seen.
Well, excuse me, I'd say good luck with that, because when I was in Washington, D.C. one time, and I had an audience with the Army Corps of Engineers, I suggested that. I said, what?
Can we get back to the presentation? It's an interesting discussion, but let's let our guest get his presentation done.
Well, I just wanted to point out that they basically said, we would love to help you improve the condition of the Indian River Lagoon, but our function is navigational depth. So until you can present a case that you don't have enough navigational depth, you're chasing your tail.
Yeah.
And Dr. Fox, I'll leave it up to you whether you'd like to take any questions as we progress or at the end. I think it can be either one. So from a practical standpoint,
I guess I'll leave that up to you.
I
If you
don't
have
want to get it
questions, I will
get us
answer
too
them.
derailed and keep us on time, but likewise, it can be difficult to come back to things.
Anyway. And so,
Just last thing, for any committee members who do have questions, let's try to keep them on track for you.
and so we can start to look at the muck with this perspective of these kind of categorical definitions of muck, right? We have these discrete deposits and these continuous. And one of the key differences is when we look in the discrete deposits where there's a significant relief, right? We have this unique grain size at the bottom of that. If we look at the continuous deposits, right, that deep area is where the other fines and things that aren't quite that muck composition are also accumulating, and so we have more mixing of the pure muck with the adjacent sand, right? And so that's something we'll discuss as we move throughout this. But so now we have probing, right? We have these really nice muck maps throughout the whole lagoon, but obviously, how do we know we got everything, right? And so how else can we define muck? And you can see it from space, right? I haven't actually seen it from space, but we can use satellites, right? And LiDAR. So most of you probably have LiDAR in your cars these days. It's kind of like sonar, but using light. And so they can actually use LiDAR to get really accurate or highly accurate bathymetric images of the lagoon. And in essence, we're just looking at depth, right? And so using this, we can quickly locate those deep areas that are protected from wave energy and get an idea of where we expect to find muck, right? And so is this accurate, right? It's easy to look at this and be like, okay, those red spots have muck, and kind of those reddish orange spots, maybe they have muck, but we need to ground truth it, right? And so that's where those probing maps come in. And there are challenges, right? LiDAR is great, but it misses some of the fine scale resolution, and so we've probed a lot of places that are near shore where there just isn't LiDAR data available. The canals and tributaries, right, there isn't LiDAR data available there. And so beyond that, the depth alone does not explain the muck distribution, right? And we'll talk about that as we move into things like canals, right? In places that have restricted circulation because they're in a canal or between islands, we're going to see muck accumulating at shallower depths. And so when we look at water depth, right, so we're now looking at LiDAR that's just looking at water depth, trying to compare it to those probing data, and we look at water depth versus the organic matter content, we see this nice general trend, right, where if you get below about 8 feet, you're probably going to have an organic matter content above 10%. And there's a couple of points on here that you'll notice, right, these upside down triangles, I don't know if they're upside down or just triangles, but some of them fit way above that line, right? They have higher organic content than we would expect based on the rest of those dots. And then we also have one of those points falling way below where you would expect. And as it turns out, that is in one of these discrete deposits, right? It's this deep area that was dredged to build a causeway. We stick our probe down and we hit at about 9 feet the sand that is sloping steeply towards the bottom, right? We move over a few feet, we probe again, that probe goes down only another foot, but suddenly we've hit that really fine-grained fluidized layer that is at that bottom of that pit, right? And so there's some really interesting observations that we see there. And then I'm going to show the same graph, just add some data from canals, right? And so canals start to fall out of this trend, right, because canals are really restricted and they tend to be shallower, and so we see muck even in shallow water when we start to move into canals. And so the point of this graph, right, is simply to say LiDAR is a great tool, but we can't use depth alone. We have to use the knowledge that we've gained from all of the probing to ground truth this. And so how do we do this, right? This is a LiDAR image that we've basically sliced into layers of approximately 10 centimeters, right? And what we do is we take a deposit. And so I'm going to circle deposit 1 here. This is a deposit just north of Pineda Causeway in Banana River. And we probe it, right? And we take the surface area from probing, and then we find the depth at which the surface area that we calculate from the LiDAR data matches it, right? And so we're getting the same number using probing versus the surface area. And so we've created a model, right? We have a depth target that we think is where we're going to find muck in these discrete deposits in this particular subbasin. So then we take another deposit, right? We use that depth that we found from deposit 1, we apply it, and hopefully, right, the surface area agrees well with probing. So we've created a model, and now we've tested it. And it works pretty well, so we apply that depth to the rest of that subbasin. What we're learning is there's slightly different depths in each of the different subbasins based on the morphology, right, the width, the wave energy in that particular subbasin. There are unique depths for each subbasin and different depths for the discrete versus continuous deposits, right? So for each subbasin, we have 2 different depths, one that we're using for discrete, one that we're using for continuous. And so overall, right, we've done this for all of the probing sites that we've done where there's matching LiDAR data. And overall, right, we get from 75% to 138% of the surface area that we get from probing with an average, right, of 103%. So we're just about the same number using our LiDAR versus the probing, plus or minus 18%. And so we can start to make this map, and so this is a map that we published in that paper that came from the combined LiDAR plus probing, and this shows basically where we think there's muck. We have not differentiated on here the continuous versus discrete, but that is separated within the tables throughout the paper. And so if we look at the amount of muck, so now we've taken Lagoon segments. These segments come from the TMDL documents, and segments 1 through 3, and you can see going south throughout the lagoon, those segment numbers increase. If we look at the total surface areas here, all right, then we can compare the amount of organic sediments and get a percent, which I will come back to. But overall, in the Indian River, right, within Brevard County, we're seeing roughly 9.4 square kilometers of this continuous muck deposits. And so that's more or less those broad, deep areas that are extending north, kind of in the center of the lagoon. We have an additional 5.1 square kilometers of discrete deposits, right? And those are those things that are very well defined. Moving into banana, right, we have same kind of thing, but to summarize that graph, we have only about 0.24 square kilometers of continuous deposits, and this is more or less the channels that have been dredged. And then we have another 4 square kilometers of discrete. Really interesting, the difference in the discrete versus continuous in the 2 different subbasins, or the 2 different basins, right? And that is really the result of banana is quite a bit shallower than the Indian River on average. The kind of cool thing that came from this is if we go back to the early papers on muck, it was estimated that it's less than 10% coverage. When we actually look at the data now, it's only about 5% of the IRL, right? And less than 3% of BRL is actually covered in muck. So I think this is maybe a good thing, right? And so just a note on here to get to this, we have probed roughly 25% of the muck that's out there. And so we're using this, again, LiDAR, trained LiDAR, to find the rest of that 75%. And now we can say, we know where the muck is, we can some general categories, let's determine benthic fluxes. And so this is quite the process, right? We go collect sediment cores, we bring them back to the lab, we hook them up to all kinds of equipment, we apply pressure, we extract the pore water, we measure the concentrations of nutrients in that pore water, and then from there we can do some math and calculate the diffusive fluxes. And diffusive fluxes in muck work, right? We have advection and diffusion in the lagoon, but this muck, because it has such a high water content, is actually impermeable to water, right? Which sounds a little funny, but there's no advection through muck. That's been shown quite a few times, and we can use diffusive fluxes. So this DS variable here, this is calculated for each site based on the water content of the sediments, the salinity of the overlying water and the pore water, and the temperature, right? And so obviously this is a really time-consuming process. We can't do this hundreds and hundreds of times, and so we've worked to develop a method that we call quick flux technique, where we use mini cores, and we're just looking at the linear portion of the surface of the sediments in order to calculate those fluxes. And then we take some correlations. Do we believe this quick flux technique? And we have this really nice correlation, right? The comparison of the quick flux to the interstitial water profiles is as good as the comparison of replicate interstitial water profile cores. And so we're very happy with this technique to allow us to increase that spatial coverage, right, the number of sites that we investigate. And so now we've calculated, we have a way to now measure fluxes, and we start to put together the total nutrient flux. From the probed sites, right, we're using the values for each site, right? If we know what the flux is, we know what the surface area is, we've calculated the flux from each of those, and that's what's showing up in blue in this table. For the discrete deposits that we haven't been to, right, that were identified via LiDAR based on that ground truthing, right, we're applying kind of the median fluxes from all of the known discrete deposits. And so these fluxes come up to 329 pounds per acre per year for nitrogen and 18 pounds of phosphorus per acre per year. These numbers are different than what we had in the past, right? And that's because in the past, we were using this overall average. People took all of the flux data that we had, mushed it together, and you got a single number instead of improving, right, that tool. So now we can give different fluxes to different deposits based on the known morphological features. And so the median for the continuous deposits is 89 pounds per acre per year and 6 pounds per acre per year for phosphorus. So that's talking about the discrete and continuous. And so one other thing that we need to discuss are tributaries and canals. And so when you move into a tributary or a canal, you have flocculation. Fresh water is moving into seawater. That increases the ionic strength. The little dissolved particles get pushed together to form larger particles that actually start to sink out. And this is a term called flocculation, right? Which really leads to higher water content, fluffier sediments, right? And if you look here, porosity, again, that fancy word for water content, and LOI is a term for the organic matter content, right? The tributaries and canals are actually shoved, in this case to the right, having higher water content with the same organic content as sediments from the open lagoon. Right? What does that mean, right? If we go back to that flux calculation, that diffusion coefficient is based on, among other things, the water content of the sediments. Things diffuse faster through water than they do through particles, right? And so the fluxes in tributaries and canals tend to be higher, even at the same organic matter content, simply because of that increased water content. And so we've calculated median fluxes for canals of 480 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year and 30 pounds of phosphorus per acre per year. So now we have fluxes from different areas, right? We can start to compare this to internal and external loading. And so this is a table just showing from the TMDL documents what the external loading is. And we can, just to summarize all of that, the benthic fluxes from muck account for somewhere between about 20 and about 40% of the total internal plus external loading, right? And so in the IRL, we're calculating 36% of the nitrogen, 23% of the phosphorus. In BRL, that's 43% of nitrogen, 25% of phosphorus. And to put this in perspective, algae blooms, right? If we look at the carbon content of the algae blooms in the lagoon, right? And then we use Redfield ratios to calculate the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that would be required by those algae blooms. The fluxes from muck could supply 100% of the nitrogen and 70% of the phosphorus required to sustain those blooms. So what does this mean, right? If we completely stopped external inputs, the muck could promote and continue those blooms, right? And so this is something that we really need to be thinking about, right? This flip that we saw in 2010 is related to a change in internal processes, and all of a sudden, internal processes are absolutely something that we have to consider, and internal processes are enough to sustain algae blooms. And so, moving on a little bit from the muck, right? So that's talking about that paper. What is the muck doing to the rest of the lagoon, right? Do the consequences of muck extend beyond the physical presence of muck? And so this is looking at dissolved oxygen throughout Banana River on December 30th, 2022 at 1 p.m. So peak photosynthetic activity. If you want to look at this as green is good, red is bad, that's fine. Be careful doing that all the time. But we're looking at high values, oxygen's really soluble when it's cold in December, right? And low values, that's when we start to have fish kills, hypoxia, those kinds of things. We come back about 12 hours later, just before sunrise, and this is at the sediment water interface, right? And we're seeing much lower oxygen. We're seeing hypoxia in places at that sediment water interface throughout Banana River. And if you compare this to the distribution of muck, right, we are seeing hypoxia occurring more frequently in places that are in closer proximity to muck. This is not like groundbreaking, right? This makes sense. Muck is consuming oxygen, decomposing, releasing nutrients. If you look in July, right, the same trend, those same areas that were experiencing hypoxia during the night in December are now experiencing hypoxia during the day, during that peak photosynthetic activity. And then we go overnight, right, and the entire Banana River is completely hypoxic, right? And in fact, July 30th, in the middle of July, we were experiencing fish kills, right? FWC got all kinds of calls. And so there are consequences that extend beyond the physical presence of the muck. And so to end this, right, don't want to go over time, this is a graph of total phosphorus in the lagoon at quite a few different sites. Most of these are in Banana. I think we have some from Indian River. 2010, there was a sudden increase in phosphorus concentrations, right? How can we explain that, right? And when we look at what happens to sand when it goes hypoxic or anoxic, right, we see the iron being reduced, which is going to decrease its ability to sequester phosphorus, right? So we're losing the ability of sediments to assimilate nutrients, right, over time. And so this is something that there was a lot of debate over, is this an analytical thing? And so we're looking at other things, right? Look at the speciation of nitrogen. We see a change at the same time, right? We see a slight decrease in the average percent of the nitrogen that exists as nitrate, right? This tells me, this reinforces that we are seeing a change in the redox state of the sediments, right? And this is not just muck, this is throughout the lagoon. And so together, right, these have led to this pretty dramatic shift in the nitrogen to phosphorus ratio, right, which can have dramatic impacts on the types of algae we see and all kinds of things. So again, this is a really brief look, right? I can talk forever, but just want to start to introduce the idea that the consequences of the muck do extend far beyond the physical presence. So with that, thank you very much. I'll take questions. I've had a lot of help with all of this stuff, right? This was a decade of information. Special thanks to John Treffry, who's been critical in making all of this possible. Thanks to all of the former and current students. And then I will end with, where did my Save the Sand go? I guess I didn't. I put it here. Yeah. So save the sand. And I also say save the worms. But
yeah, Dr. Fox, thank you. No, as usual, great presentation. A quick question, 40 pounds per acre for the canals. What was the number for the lagoon?
So it was the 480 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year.
480? Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
For canals.
And what is it for in the lagoon?
In the lagoon, we have the two different numbers. So the discrete deposits is 329.
Yeah.
And the continuous is 89. And those are the nitrogen numbers.
Yeah. Oh, it's just reflecting on my muck mapping work back, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 years ago. One of the things I remember is we were Sykes Creek and we had the predicted map, muck coverage, and we were out there probing, not finding anything. It's like, whoa, the map is wrong. But now after this presentation, I'm thinking maybe we were in one of those, soft transition areas where we weren't actually finding the top of the muck. I don't know. I don't know that nobody went over the side in a scuba tank, so don't know. The other thing is, having done some of that muck mapping in the canals, I tell you, some of the worst goo I've ever found is up in those canals. So I'm glad you're extending the investigation into that, because to me that's an obvious serious contributor to the overall state of health.
Well, I changed my title slide picture because it was, I thought, too scary, and I wanted to remove my viewer discretion was advised thing. But it was decomposing drift algae in the muck, and it's covered with sulfur oxidizing bacteria. And that's what we see in places like the canals very frequently. And so when you're probing in canals, that is one of the places where it's actually really hard to feel that surface because it is so fluidized. That higher water content makes it really difficult to probe
Wasn't too hard to find the surface in the canals I was in. I mean, our pontoon boat was running aground.
Yep, Terry, I was actually on a couple of those expeditions in Sykes Creek, and we also had the shallow water issue when we were out there with MRC and did that a couple of times. I don't know if you remember Zach and you being out there. I was going to ask, with the stagnant areas along the canals, the difference and with what the organic matter can absorb, is salinity a factor in that? In the tributaries, did you test stagnant waters or any ponds that connect through canals or drainage?
So we've been focused on the lagoon, and salinity is absolutely a factor. So if we look at just the ability of sediments to sorb, the other ions in solution do sorb, and so as we increase salinity, we're actually going to potentially desorb additional nitrogen. So it affects it, but not nearly as much as the change in redox state.
So does that fluctuate per the season, like with the salinity content in the lagoon from season to season?
That's a good question, and there's
Thank you.
there's really large-scale trends. So it's like the salinity lagoon has been effectively decreasing continuously over the last 10 to 15 years.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I look forward to continued information.
Thank you. Thank you.
Benny?
Oh, yeah, first off, science, this is science. I love science, and especially the part about this is 6 years ago when we started this, we were like, or 7 years ago, we're like, there's muck, we find the muck, and now we've continued to look and hone in and find exactly what it's doing. And so as somebody who loves technology, like I love it when tech gets better, and this is science getting better. So Dr. Fox, thank you and your staff for doing this. I think it's so interesting again to see the canal difference, and that's like one area where like projects of scale just don't work, and it's so hard to figure out how to get that muck out of there and where it goes. But I think it shows the importance of that area. And I want to just, you said that what the science shows is the internal loading alone is enough to support an algal bloom. Is that correct?
It is, and so again, in the water overlying muck, we could support it continuously throughout the year, right? But those impacts, it's going to help supply nutrients to the algae and adjacent waters also.
Okay, thank you.
Your map overlays, the spots where the actual muck, the sediment was concentrated, that didn't correspond directly to that last evening or right before dawn oxygen map. Is there other factors that you identified besides just the sediments, besides just the muck or specific muck definition as described?
So you're saying it was right here.
So in where you showed that the actual sedimentations are actually in much smaller, minute areas than the whole basin. And then that last July, I mean, it increases and, the dissolved oxygen decreases through the night. But that overlay is the whole waterway, basically. So that doesn't correspond to the actual concentrated sites of muck. So are there other factors that were identified that are causing that decrease in DO?
So this is all relatively new data. So I've been spearheading this hypoxia as a problem over the past couple of years. And so we're just starting to be able to make maps like this. And you can see some of the dots, right? I would love to have higher resolution to be able to really focus in on how far away is that muck a problem. But the really cool thing is, right, there are muck deposits down here, but we actually are seeing that hypoxia spreading to sandy areas that are not directly on top of it. And so that's why my real concern with muck is that when we look at these, let's go back here, that doesn't look full, right? This looks like it could hold more muck. But in fact, what we're seeing is that is very likely full because the wave energy that is flowing over that is enough to resuspend any additional muck at that grain size. And so these may be full even though they don't look full. And so if they're full, what's happening, right? That muck is going other places. And so the thing that keeps me up at night is the muck, this is getting intermixed with the adjacent sand, right? And the fluxes are much lower, right? So if we say pure muck versus the muck admixed with sand, yes, the muck is way worse, but I don't know what we do about that other stuff, right? We can't dredge it, right? It's mostly sand, right? But the small changes, the changes to the chemistry in that material that is going to become ubiquitous if we don't address the muck issue, right? I don't know what we do about it. And so, again, I didn't have time to include it here, but we're working on some studies of the ability of sand in the lagoon to sorb phosphorus. And it is decreased, right? We've tried to build a time machine, it didn't work, so we're using papers from 20 years ago that have looked at the sorption capacity of sediments, and it is in fact less now than it was then. And so what that means is the sediments can no longer hold as much phosphorus as they used to. And so when we talk about TMDLs and the ability of the system to assimilate nutrients, right, that's changing. And I think that's the thing that's scary to me. And so I think we really need to be considering how do we preserve the ecological function of the sand, right? And so that's my save the sand, save the worms.
I was going to ask, is that your preface for saying save the sand because it's spreading into a different content and
because
you haven't resolved how to save the sand yet? Is that what your purpose is to look at? Is that your goal?
So it's interesting. So I always look at this from, okay, I'm spend all my time thinking about this, what would I do about it? And people want to do aeration, right? So I'm saying hypoxia is a problem, let's just put some bubbles in. And I reflect back to that quite frequently. And we tried it and it didn't work, right? And it's because you can aerate the overlying water, but the challenge is getting that oxygen through that sediment water interface. And you do that with worms. Not just worms, right? You do it with diggers. You do it with things that live in the sediments that dig holes. You do it with the life that's there. But these hypoxic events, the fish kills make the news, right? But you don't hear that we wiped out a bunch of amphipods, right? You don't hear that we wiped out a bunch of worms, right? And so we need to be restoring the things that are living there and digging it. We need to restore the things that are not charismatic megafauna, right? Those things will help to save those charismatic things. But we really need to get a focus on save the sand, right? Save the worms, save the diggers. And that, in my opinion, there will be, in the long run, no more effective method to improving nutrient removal than restoring that ability to get oxygen through that sediment water interface.
It's very the same as composting and with char composting and aeration to, ground regular soils. So is there studies, is there pilots, are there things you want to do that you haven't been able to start yet in regard to that?
We are working really hard to understand exactly what the problem is, right? Because this is all hypothetical at this point. It's my hypothesis as we've lost these organisms. There's just so relatively few data on the digging. And so we just got funded through NEP to study the impacts of sulfide on seagrasses, right? And so when we talk about seagrasses, right, you hear that the seagrasses, right, they stick up out of the sand and they actually help to knock down those suspended particles. They actually help to collect that turbidity into fine-grained sediments in the seagrass beds, which is muck, right, in some extent. But the cool thing about seagrass is they collect that muck, but they're also injecting oxygen into the sediments, which is going to promote that breakdown of muck. As we lose seagrasses, right, those sediments are going to migrate to other places where there aren't roots, there aren't diggers adding oxygen to the sediments, right? And so it's going to slow that rate of decomposition. It's going to lead to the production of things like sulfide, right? And it's going to contribute to this positive feedback loop of just bad.
Are seagrasses the habitat for those diggers? Is there a correlation between the loss of diggers and the loss of seagrass?
So seagrass beds are absolutely habitats for those kinds of things. And the question, right, is which one comes first? And I think that's something a lot of people are working on at this point. And so I'm happy to see that there's starting to be the idea of co-restoration. So we mentioned projects where they're doing clams and seagrasses. And I think we need to restore infauna as much as we can, but I think we also need to be looking at some species that are less popular maybe. So my dream would be to just pick up the infauna from one place, move them not very far, right, a local transplant, and then just say these things were surviving in similar sediments, but they may have been wiped out here by a hypoxic event a few weeks ago, right?
Okay. Don, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
So again, that's just my opinions.
The same area that you're showing there between, say, 520 and down to Ogali causeways is also where we're seeing a lot of prolifera proliferating, and also drift algae, and that's starting to cycle. Both of those, the problem with both of those is they eliminate oxygen on the bottom. They'll go right over the top and prevent oxygen from, getting to the bottom and cause further hypoxia.
Yes, yes.
And also lead to more muck, too.
Okay, any other questions? Lauren?
Thanks, Dr. Fox. That was fantastic. I have like a million questions, but a friend of mine sent me an email about chemical-free LG Sonic. So we tried air bubbles, but this uses ultrasonic wave blocks that would prevent algae's access to sunlight and nutrients. Have you heard of that, or are you familiar with that? Does it have any merit?
I've heard of several ultrasonic techniques, but I guess I don't have enough information to really comment. I don't know if anybody else has comments. I think just scalability is an issue there.
Okay. Kurt?
Doctor, my question is, how can myself and my fellow board members here get this information out to the public and to the county commission and to city councils? Because this is fascinating. I mean, this really gets down to the crux of the matter of solving the problem with the lagoon. And, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do, but information is the key. So, fellow board members, how do we get that information out there?
I'd actually like to comment on that, because that is what I was going to make the comment on, because I think this is, one, it was an outstanding technical presentation. You've got a lot of technical people here, and so it's going to connect there. And so for a significant portion of the folks, it may be too technical, but it's the kind of thing that if we can encourage that connection, that maybe people will get technical and learn about some of those items. But, so for me, there were two really dramatic takeaways from this discussion, and one is that you've come up with some more efficient ways of understanding where to focus energies, which is significant for this committee in prioritizing where to spend money, because more bang for your buck. So that's one thing that I'd love to see us take away from here. But the other is as well that implication of the interconnectedness of the system. So from that standpoint, that the muck on its own can support these algae blooms, but that it's also, but we've also got to, we know that from a cyclical standpoint, the ongoing contributions are adding nitrogen to support current blooms, but they're also supporting regeneration of the muck over time too. So that piece, back to our communications and storytelling, we may already have this, but I think that piece of, again, highlighting the interconnectedness and the takeaways to use storyboarding and storytelling as a simplified entry into this more complex data, because I think with the right interest levels and being able to connect people to it, you're going to get folks that are going to begin to dive more into the technical understanding of it. So, Stephanie?
Again, everyone said it, but this was really incredible to actually have data to prove what we've all thought was happening. And I think that just as he said, probably the biggest takeaway for me is we keep hearing individuals saying over and over and over again, why are you focusing on the muck? You need to be focusing on preventing muck from occurring because, working on preventing things from getting into the lagoon. But the fact that even if we prevent everything in the future from getting into the lagoon, the muck itself is going to provide the media for algal blooms. And that's really important information, as he said, to get out, because there's a whole group of individuals that don't believe that. And you've proven that it's true. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just
Just
one quick question. Your chart, the color chart with the day and the night and so on, that was measured, that was DO measurements at the sediment boundary.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so it wasn't like the whole body of water went zero.
So being a geochemist, I've looked at the St. John's data and the other continuous monitoring data that's out there, and it's fantastic for understanding the system, but I've just approached it with different questions, right? I'm looking at the geochemical cycling that's leading to the sequestration of phosphorus and nitrogen, coupled nitrification, denitrification, is happening at that sediment-water interface. And because the sediments accumulate those organics, that's where we have the most respiration.
Yeah.
So that's where I expect to have the lowest oxygen. And so we said we need to get these sensors on the bottom. And so we're now measuring at that interface.
Yeah.
And it's
Well-
incredible what we're learning.
Yeah, and that's why I think your observation about why the bubbling technique didn't work is so important. But to extend that then, so if the measurements were taken, how did you then extend that chart to deal with the sand areas where the muck is not present, but you're still seeing this drop in DO?
So we have sensors spread out throughout the Banana River.
Okay, so
And
not dependent on just where the muck is, but just sampling.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, and
thank
so
you.
they're measuring every hour right now, continuously, and then we extract those maps. And again, we have a lot of sensors, but the resolution could still be better to really narrow in on, because the question is how far, right? How far away do we actually see the impacts of those muck deposits? Because I could have kept going and shown you the actual fluxes from oxic sandy sediments versus anoxic sandy sediments. And I mean, it's scary. It turns from a sink, right? It assimilates nutrients, but as we take away the oxygen at night, right, it's actually adding nutrients, the sandy sediments. And when you take 400 square kilometers and you change it from a sink to a source, that's a lot of nitrogen. All of a sudden, some of the other things we're talking about just don't seem so big.
And that's in the paper?
That's not in that paper. That was a muck paper. That's kind of where we're headed now, is really trying to understand that. Because, again, this hypoxia data is only relatively recent. And so I have like 3 or 4 years worth of data at a couple of sites looking at how does it respond to those hypoxic events. But our question was then, okay, how much hypoxia is there? And so that's what we're really trying to get at now. And we just don't have enough data yet to have that published.
Okay, let me move.
Yeah,
2 more questions, and then we'll start to wrap this up.
I'm not sure any amount of data that you end up producing is going to convince certain people of the facts, but I think the decision makers are the ones who need to understand this. And I'll go back to an analogy that I think of with muck. It's like a cancer. And if you have a cancer, the doctors are usually going to tell you to go, get rid of it, as well as any external forces that may be contributing to that cancer. So maybe that's something, in that type of analogy, people can better understand it. I think the other thing that comes from this is these factors, the biotic and the abiotic that are working together, as we expand the program, hopefully it keeps going on, we need to look at these other things, the living components now, worms and, the shorelines, restoring those, so maybe you get, more sandy shores. So thanks for doing this. It was a great piece of work.
Thank you.
Okay, and
I
have a question over here.
After Eric.
I guess I just have a quick question. I know looking at some of the tables and stuff that we have in the plan they seem to indicate that muck dredging is like not the best expense, just based on the per pounds of nitrogen and everything on that table. And I'm kind of curious as to whether or not there might be some sort of way to redefine those numbers or something to reflect the impact that the muck projects have as compared to the sewer projects and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I have to confess, when I first started on the committee, I was the numbers person, said, let's make it the most efficient investment, and candidly, I've been converted. Because from a practical standpoint, I think what you're hearing here and what we've seen as a committee is that any singular focus is problematic. Because if we focus on muck, we're not addressing the contributions of the future. if we are only addressing the contributions of the future, we're not affecting what's happening today. So as much as an engineer and a finance-oriented person, I love the numbers the way they are. I have continued to be more and more impressed with the elegance of the plan of a more holistic solution that is also connecting with different people as well, because as much as all of the perspectives of our community have valuable influence and input on what we do here. And I think we've seen that through the data. There is so much interplay across everything that multi-level focus, even if it's not exactly the most cost-effective on that one piece. But I think your comment is very valid in that continuing to tell that interplay story of how that fits together, because of the finance-minded people are going to say, let's go put most bang for the buck. Is really important.
So I just want to clarify, I'm a huge champion of investigation and of prevention, but as someone who is a very outspoken opponent of fertilizers, that muck is our biggest source point of fertilizers, and it has to come out. I definitely agree with what Stephanie said, with what Charlie said. I mean, that's it. If you're opposed to fertilizers, you have to get the muck out because it's there and it's a sink for it and it's holding it. And so while prevention and further investigation is necessary, the end point on that is definitely the holistic approach, like you explained. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Just quick,
Okay, last question. Go ahead.
and just another big takeaway is just urgency.
Yep.
So to add to all of the other fine points.
Virginia?
You talked about the importance of grants and leveraging swirl dollars. So we funded, or the Lagoon tax funded these DO sensors in some of our muck removal project areas and immediate surrounds to try to collect this sort of information, right where we have a project. And then Dr. Fox used that funding to go leverage other funding to be able to put his sensors elsewhere in the lagoon. So I don't know if you want to expand on that, but just it's another way that this program is leveraging data and information, way beyond the confines of our projects.
Excellent.
And so just to that point, we are monitoring dissolved oxygen in some of the places that have been dredged. And we do not yet have a place before and after it's been dredged, but we do have canals, data from canals that haven't been dredged and canals that have been dredged. And we are seeing improved oxygen states, right? We're seeing oxygen returning to the bottom. And then just anecdotally being there, we're seeing life returning to the bottom. Because when you look at the biodiversity in these canals that have anoxic sediments and are hypoxic all the time, there's virtually nothing living there other than bacteria at the bottom. So that's been really great to see. And then, we were able to leverage, so we used the Sykes Creek monitoring that was funded through Sorrel to leverage and get the funding from NEP that actually funded all those graphs. So that was made possible through leveraging funds that came from monitoring.
Excellent. So I think on behalf of all of the committee and certainly on behalf of the community, thank you for all the work that you're doing and a great presentation and heading us in an awesome path.
Thank you. And if I can make just a couple more comments. So you said, can we look at this as having a bigger impact? And if we look at a box of muck, there are 6 sides, and we are calculating the flux from one side. Right, and so we are seeing certainly downward diffusion into the sand, which is moving with the advection into the adjacent lagoon. And so I really do think that there is a significantly larger benefit than we're calculating. But those are just, again, how do you quantify it? Mm-hmm. And then also, right, that muck represents 50 years or 60 years or decades worth of accumulation of nitrogen. And so I think that was somebody's point earlier is there's the pounds per year, but also the total amount. And then my last comment is, in terms of education, how do we get this information out there? We've been in classrooms sometimes, right? And so I've had students go present in classrooms, and they are eager for information on things, right? The curriculum now focuses on things like seagrasses and manatees. But I say to save the manatees, you have to save the seagrass. But to save the seagrass, you have to save the sand, right? And so I think there are some opportunities, right, for some outreach to classrooms. And the teachers are hungry for this material. And so it seems like you're well positioned to help to get that out there. And I'm happy to help guide any information they want to get out there, so.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
On the messaging, the education outreach, I know it's good. If you can connect it to an action, it makes it so much better. Because when people learn stuff, if there's something they can do right then, that usually drives home that point. And that's one of the hard things with muck, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what can a homeowner do when the dredge is way out there and the DMMA is way out there? So I think if we can find ways, maybe save a worm, I don't know, throw a worm in the lagoon. I'm joking, please. But I think you tie it to an action and it magnifies the message because it becomes the action.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next presentation, Cocoa Beach Junior Senior High School Aqua Science Program, Cole Mammons.
How y'all doing? And Dr. Fox, you are in luck. This is the best day because I work with Brevard Public Schools, and we're going to talk here in just a second. My name is Cole Manis. I'm the Assistant Principal of Operations over at Cocoa Beach Junior Senior High School. And originally, yep, that's the one. Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. Originally, the original plan was to come in and kind of be getting to know you, show you what a resource you have with Brevard Public Schools at Cocoa Beach in particular, and to show you about one of our new CTE programs. And then I just heard this presentation, and I'm going to try and poach Dr. Fox here. We're right on the Banana River. There's muck everywhere. There's sand everywhere. And I got some cards. We're going to talk. So this is one of our new CTE programs. What is CTE? CTE is a career in technical education. And what our goal is with the CTE classes is that the kiddos get certifications, real life, real world application while they're in high school. A lot of the times it's for non-college track students, but it can also be for college track students. We call it CBAS, Cocoa Beach Aqua Science, and it's directed for both of those students. So the instructional progression with our Aqua Science program, first it starts with Agri-Science Foundations. This is our first year. We're in our very first year right now. We just did our first certification test. We're waiting on the results for those, but we just started. We have a combination right now of 9th and 10th graders because it was our first year and we're building the program as it goes. The first class is Agri-Science Foundations, which kind of trips them up in the beginning because they're like, I thought we were looking at fish and I'm learning about cows and all these things. But it's the foundation. There's a lot of biology in there and then agriculture as well. And then we funnel them into strictly aquaculture at our school. So it goes 2, 3, and 4. The certifications that we're getting together for them, right now they just took this week their agriculture associate. So if you can imagine being in 9th grade, you have this cool class that you're doing, you're into science, you're into the Indian River Lagoon, and you can walk out at your 9th grade year being certified as an agriculture associate. It's pretty cool. It's a great carrot that we get to hang in front of the kiddos at the end. We are working on our life system support, which when I first started this, okay, life system support, what is that? Well, it's a burgeoning growth job field right now. The AZA, the aquariums, they need these people that are coming to come through and take care of their aquariums. The kids are really fired up about getting that one going. We're working on that one. 11th grade, they would take their aquaculture technician certification. So again, we're talking about 16, 17-year-olds. When they're finished, and they have these opportunities to have 3 certifications at that point. And in the 12th grade year, we're looking at adding this as well. This is pool certification. This is kind of specific to those kiddos I was talking about before. Not necessarily college bound, but in Cocoa Beach specifically, you're talking about a kid coming out of high school with a pool certification with resorts all over the place. And they have the opportunity to get that into their job market that way too. So this is just kind of a background of some of the, I won't read all these bullets to you, obviously. Yeah, that's a no-no in education. But this is just kind of so you have a background information on what these courses look like. The first one that they're in right now, the agri-science one, again, they're like, oh, we're learning about cows and stuff like this. So we got aquariums, which I'll show you in a second, so we make sure that they know what's going on. But that's the foundational course for them that they'll take as most likely a 9th grader or a 10th grader. But it's a lot of history too. And they learn how to be leaders in the field and how to get jobs. So again, we're conflating those 2 fields to try and give them the college bound and the ones who are ready to work at the same time. Okay, from there they go to aquaculture 2. Now this is where they start looking at the actual equipment. I'm going to show you some pictures here in a second. Our facilities are going to be very, very good. I actually brought with me Deputy Superintendent of our facilities, Sue Han. I think some of you recognize her from her time here. She and I have been working together to try and get some of our green initiatives going. So she's been a big part of this as well. So once they get to the aquaculture too, we do have a lab that we're getting, an aqua lab. The construction is starting right now. They're laying all the stuff out as we speak. And they'll actually be able to get in there and get hands-on. And I'll go into details about the lab here in a minute. And then for them, it just progresses. So then they have aquaculture 3. That's when they can become an aquaculture technician. And this is where they actually start cultivating the tanks on their own. Now, obviously, we have teachers that are there to help them. Maybe a new one soon. That we can make sure that they get their hands dirty. They can actually learn some of those things by themselves with a teacher there. But a lot of it starts getting more student-driven and not just the teacher showing them how to do everything. So they're learning it with their hands on. Once you get to these levels, it's going to be 20% of the curriculum is lab-based education. It's not just book work and computer work. They're in the labs. And then obviously our year 4, this is where the kids will actually be running it, and we're going to be looking for internships where they can go. That's another big reason why I'm here today, is I want to start making some partnerships and reaching out to people who would be able to offer those internships for our kiddos when they get to this point. That's a big push that we're looking to make. We're working with our Rotaries, our Elks Lodges, organizations like that. And then this group is our like-minded people that I know there's a lot of contacts out there that we could make. Okay, the CTE world, there's a lot of different ones. One of the other ones at our school is digital design. And so this video was made by one of our students in the CTE program. And these are students who are already in agri-science and why they chose it and why they're going to look to continue that course. I chose to enroll in the aqua science program because since we live so close to the lagoon, learning about everything and the systems and how they work was super important to me.
I chose to enroll in the aqua science program so that I can do more of what I love, learning about animals and all.
I'm excited to learn about aquatic animals and more about our lagoon because I want to better our environment.
I'm excited to learn about our ecosystem and how each animal affects how it runs and how the fish tanks and all the environment work together.
Earning certifications in high school makes me feel accomplished, honored, and grateful that I've had this opportunity at our school.
I feel like it makes me look really responsible and it looks really good on applications.
After high school, I would like to go into the field of biotechnology or anything involving biology in general.
I'm interested in like helping animals be like a veterinarian, so like that, or being like a Coast Guard, helping the animals.
Living near the Indian River Lagoon is like an awesome blessing I have. You can one day go fishing, next day be on a boat, jet ski, just exploring the islands and the marine life we have. It's a lot of things you can do, that's why I live it.
After growing up in a landlocked area in New York, it's really nice to just be surrounded by water every day and begin to go out and explore the islands and just honestly just have so much fun in the lagoon. So that was all student-made from our CTE programs. They put that all together. She worked her tail off on that one. There was so much noise from the aquariums. I don't know nothing about nothing in that world, but it took her a long time to put that together because of all the noise that was going on, so it was pretty impressive. And mullets are back. I don't know if y'all knew that, but mullets are back. They're alive and well in the secondary world. So here are some of the green initiatives. That's my guy, Sean. These are some of the new initiatives that we have going, particularly at Cocoa Beach. So the facilities I'll go over with you in just a moment. We have our classroom. It's going to be outfitted with aquariums, and we're stocking those right now. The Aqua Lab is in construction mode right now. We have an outdoor classroom that we're getting. That's supposed to be here by August of this upcoming August. So if you can think like a beach pavilion, and I'll go into that. And then a dock. We've got a floating dock off the south side right on the Banana River that the kids can go out there. We have an outdoor PE class. They can fish off of that. They go out there and they do their water quality. The future lab, we're going to have 3 different outdoor tanks too. We're looking at doing mangroves and Spartina grass out there. Obviously the big one, seagrass. We're looking to culture seagrass while we're in there. And then once they start getting advanced and doing it on their own, we can look at transplanting those things with the correct partnerships. And then fish. Our green stormwater infrastructure we're looking at doing. We are going to have a little parking spot right by the Aqua Lab. It is right on Minuteman Causeway, so there's a lot of cars that go by that, so there's a lot of opportunities for education outreach right there. And even like looking at some projects that maybe we can't do wide scale, but permeable pavement or just things you can show off as potential for anybody driving by, what they could do in their communities. We also have 2 big ticket items as far as something that we call Lake Minuteman. We are the Cocoa Beach Minutemen, and there's a depressed area by the fields that holds a lot of water as soon as it rains just a little bit. And we were looking at potential of turning that into some kind of water treatment before it goes out into the Indian River Lagoon, because we are right on the Banana River. We are looking at Florida-friendly landscaping for immediate partners on that, and then some rain gardens on site. All right, so our classroom. It's a lot cleaner now. This was when we first got them in there. Okay, so that's where the kiddos are at, and we have 5 separate 85-gallon tanks in there. The teacher takes care of those with the kids right now. We do not have fish in them yet because we are going slow to make sure we have it done correctly and we're not just throwing life forms in there without a plan and teenagers involved. There's a lot of, you have to be circumspect when you're doing some of those things with kiddos. And so we are just doing a slow build with that. Okay, Aqua Lab. This is the big thing that we are excited about right now. This is going to be about 1,300 square feet. Non-AC, but it is regulated, like they have the retractable roof to go up and down as far as the temperature goes. So if the AC goes out, it's not a big deal with this one. The species will be safe in that regard. We have 10 separate 500-gallon tanks that are going in there. The 3 on the bottom, those are our outdoor tanks, and then we have the 7 inside. That's where we're going to do our bivalves, our seagrass, the fish that are going to be in there. The 2 on the corner, the 2 fish tanks, those are 150 gallons, and we're going to be raising mummy chogs there, and we're collecting their feces to make the rest of the system work correctly. So all of that goes into the actual lab. This is going to be right on campus inside our security envelope, and the kiddos will go from their classroom straight out to the lab, immediate access to all kinds of fun stuff for the lagoon. The outdoor classroom, this is just a prototype. We're in the bidding process and we're at the actual design phase. This is just an idea of what they could look like. That's what we're looking at. It's going to be very similar to like a beach access, but it will have a storage area as well. It'll hold a whole class of students, and it's right on the border of the Indian River Lagoon. So when they're out there, it's right next to the dock. So they can go out to the dock, they can come in and be sheltered from weather and have shade and all that. Portable dock. This is here now. This was quite the process. I learned a lot, and a lot of people in this room helped me out a lot, so I appreciate you for that, side table especially. It goes out about 27 feet right now. This started as something that 2 of my science teachers, shout out to Mr. Marduli and Mr. Ebright, they have been wanting to do this forever, and it was one of those things that there's so much red tape involved with these things that it kind of just kept getting pushed back, and we decided, no, we're going to make this happen. Took about a year, and now that is there. It only goes out about 28 feet. Our riparian rights go out to 198 feet, I believe. So it's another situation where we can use this to extend, and we can do a lot of fun stuff out there on the dock and educational stuff. All right, so the locations, if you're not familiar with our campus, that is the Banana River right there. So the dock is already in. And then that is where the X is where the outdoor classroom would be. And then right above it, these 2 areas, that's what I was referring to as Lake Minuteman. That has some potential where we could do some kind of media filter to get to any of the treatment that goes on the fields before it goes out into the Indian River Lagoon. All right, so the picture on your left, that is our west parking lot. It's impossible to see right now, but there is zero drainage, zero anything there. Everything that gets put into that west parking lot stays in that west parking lot. Doesn't go anywhere until it eventually gets blown down into the swale of the river here, and it goes directly into the Indian River Lagoon. The treatment area of our pipes, our drainage under the football field, go directly into the Indian River Lagoon. So we are trying to figure out a solution to that, and that's a very large project that we're looking for partnership on as well. If you look at the picture on the right, that's about 2.6 acres worth of depressed land that we could turn into something as well. And the idea with that would be anything treated for the ball fields would go through that area. This is Ms. Roselip. She's awesome. She won the Sustainability Award last year for all the work she did from diatoms to dolphins. And she also she's going the sea oat planting. She's doing that this weekend. We got a beach cleanup going on this weekend. We got kids that are getting after it, and she is one of the leaders on our campus to get them going. All these stakes got delivered to the front office. I didn't know what the heck they were, but apparently they're for the sea oat plantings. This Saturday they were planting them, so they're going to have a lot of kids out at Kelly Park, and then also where the sea oats are going. Not going to read all that. She does awesome stuff. Okay, Keys trip. So we also have a very dedicated science lead, Mr. Ebright, and he organizes a trip to Key Largo for the kids where they go snorkeling, they go out and do biological surveys, water quality testing, and it's becoming an annual trip that we do. The kids do fund it themselves. It takes a lot of help, obviously, from the community to make that happen too, but they are going down there with marine science on the mind. So we have a lot of kids that go for that as well. All right, so again, the main reason I came here was to show you the work that we're doing and what we're trying to build out there. Again, it's in its neophytical stages right now in that it's just year one. We're in year one right now, but we are growing it as we go, and we are ready to impact the Indian River Lagoon specifically. Like, yes, we're doing these other things. Yes, we have other CTE programs, but Indian River Lagoon is what's on the forefront for the sea bass program. Our faculty is amazing. Our students are already getting after it. They're ready. They just took the test. They want to know what's coming up for next year. They're already asking about curriculum. I said, I don't know. Leave me alone. I'm trying to go home, but I'll talk to you tomorrow. And they're very excited about where the direction that we're going with it. And then so for partnerships, I brought a gajillion business cards. I've been at the same school for 2.5 years. I have not had a business card because nobody gives them out anymore. I made them just for this so I could start throwing them out like confetti to whoever will take a business card from me, because I want to try and get as many relationships here as possible, because we have the energy, we have the spirit, we have the horses, but sometimes I need the direction, and I like concrete steps. And I think everyone in this room could help me with the concrete steps. It could be as small as we're looking to do Florida-friendly landscaping. We just got the locates done. We're going to tear out all of our existing landscaping before spring break, so that's like 3 weeks. I'm going to get a crew, and we're going to get in there and start getting after it. But I need help getting Florida-friendly plants, and I want to make it a community event. So if you have contacts in that world, that'd be great. Rain gardens on site. We just got new awnings. One of my science teachers says, well, why can't we just make rain barrels at the bottom of every single pole? And I said, well, because we have to mow around every single pole. So again, we have the ideas, but we need that concrete in that direction. Green stormwater infrastructure, those are the two big ticket items. We've already had engineers in there looking at it. We are serious about it. We've already been working toward it. I've already applied for a grant. I swung and I missed. But I applied for the grant because we were trying to get things to get the nitrogen and phosphorus out of our school footprint. The seawall, our south seawall, is corroding. It's falling apart. We would need help with that as well. And we have a lot of invasives like everybody. We have carrot wood and a lot of Brazilian pepper trees right there on the lagoon next to the dock, where we would just need help coming in and getting all those out of there. So in conclusion, that's what Cocoa Beach has got going on right now. Again, it's in its beginning phases, but we are dedicated to making it one of the best CTE programs around, and we just need some help and partnerships as we go, and it will be reciprocal. So thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions or?
Well, it kind of did, if you don't mind.
Sorry.
Drop the mic and walks away.
Well, in your curriculum, do you get into the connections with what, because my husband is in this line of work at NASA, learning how to use water in space, learning to grow plants, but all of these things, the soils, the atmosphere, are impacted, and maintaining the water quality. Do you make those connections with the kids, or we certainly have the resources in this area?
We certainly do, and that's another thing I'm working on. We are trying to get to other groups too. I've got another. I'm basically spending a lot of my time going to groups, going to the Rotaries, going to the Elks, getting all those connections to get people who know those things. We'll talk later again also.
Yeah.
And so yes, we would like to. The curriculum is open in these. Like it's here's the curriculum. I mean, we have it. So all these are pulled straight from the curriculum, but the way they're written, there is wiggle room to do whatever needs to be done. So to answer your question, yes, we will do those things.
Because those are career opportunities here as well.
Laura Lee?
That was great. It's really refreshing to see what you're doing. In the city of Titusville, we're trying to change the tree list in our technical manual, and we're trying to convert it to 60 to 70% natives, with the other percentage being Florida-friendly plants that specifically attract insects and bees and birds, because we've lost so much of our native landscaping, and the landscape packagers that the developers use they're definitely not Florida, they're not even Florida-friendly. But there's a difference between Florida-friendly plants versus Florida-native plants. And I think you have an opportunity, you're at the ground floor, start with Florida natives. Forget about Florida-friendly, or use the Florida-friendly plants that are good for insects and bees and birds, because that's going to benefit the lagoon and everybody. And I think there are people from the Florida Native Plant Society that would roll over backwards to be able to help you. There's one in particular, her name is Kim Gibbs. I think she's from the Sea Rocket chapter. She's done extensive work helping us with that tree list for Florida, for Titusville. One of the things that you're going to run into is that there's not a lot of places to purchase Florida native plants. But we believe that if there becomes a demand, that the demand will create a market, and more people will get into growing Florida native plants. So I think you have a huge opportunity there to use the Florida native plant concept versus Florida friendly. Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks
ma'am.
for everything you're doing. And I would like one of your cards, please.
I got one. I got them in my pocket right here too. And on the bee phase, it was just funny because I don't know if you've noticed in your neighborhoods, the bees have been thick lately. At least they are at Cocoa Beach. And I had all these people calling me on the radio that said, "Hey, we got to get rid of these bees." I said, "Are you nuts? I'm not going to go out there." And so we just started taking the trash out more, obviously, and it helped. But I don't, some people don't think about that side of it. But yeah, we'll absolutely look at that. Thank you.
Okay, Vinny?
Yeah, just first off, thank you for leaning in. It's like a leadership term. When there's
Yeah.
a problem, you can turn the other way. But with Fixing Lagoon, you guys are actually leaning into it and teaching future people how to fix the problem. So thank you for doing that, and BPS for supporting you. I think that's awesome. And you might have swung and missed, but you stepped up to the plate, Cole. So thank you and other people in the community who are stepping up to the plate, because it's going to take everybody to fix this. So thank you, BPS. This is awesome. So cool.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, thanks a bunch.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, couple videos.
All right, so since we talked a little bit about muck, we're going to start off with our Muckcrete video to see how one of our students in the area is repurposing muck for beneficial purposes.
I got into muckcrete when I was in 6th grade, and I did it actually first as a science research project, and I got really into the science behind concrete. But it was also the environmental impact that it was having and how the muck was affecting my local ecosystem really was important to me. So what muck is it's actually a local pollutant. It's caused by the runoff of lawn fertilizers, grass clippings, sewage, and other pollutants. And as they run off into the lagoon, they accumulate in the bottom and muck is formed. And it's a very thick, sludgy, mud-like material that covers the bottom of the river, and it basically suffocates all plant and animal life. So I've actually been doing research with muckcrete for like 5 years now, and I really learned just the simple statistic of, oh, there's enough muck in the Indian River Lagoon alone to pave a road from the Keys to Maine. So I was like, okay, why don't we try to pave a road? And then I started doing research into what concrete was made of, and I learned about how the aggregate of concrete is usually a variety of different things, whether that's gravel or sand or a different material. And I basically was like, okay, why can't muck be that aggregate, whether it's combined with sand or gravel or whatever? And after a couple of years of testing, I ended up coming up with the latest updated product, and that's what is being used to make all the pavers today. I was able to visit one of the dredge sites and actually collect all of the muck for this specific project. And basically what the actual process of turning that muck into concrete is we mix all the dry ingredients, gravel, cement, and sand together. And then once all of those are thoroughly mixed, we'll add the wet ingredients. So that's the water and the muck. Then after all of that is thoroughly mixed together, we'll pack them into pavers. Today I have 5 volunteers with me. Across the 4 different builds, I've had a variety of different people come. Basically friends that I know, people that are just willing to help, care about the environment, care about what I'm doing, and just want to help out.
I'm here to be able to help my friend do something she cares about and also be able to help save the environment a little and to do something positive with the pavers.
What this is actually composed of is actually there's only 15% muck in each paver. But in the 200 pavers that I'm making, I got rid of 10 5-gallon barrels of muck, so 50 gallons of muck. But in the big scheme of things, those 50 gallons of muck is very small in the total amount of muck there is. So if we were to continue projects, make more pavers, or if a bigger company were to take on this project starting to incorporate muck, we could be able to get rid of really massive amounts of muck.
So behind us is our state licensed mangrove nursery where we grow all 3 species of native Florida mangroves, and these muckcrete pavers are being used within the nursery as a walkway for our volunteers to have easier access to our nursery.
This is the first large-scale project that these muckcrete pavers, or muckcrete for any purpose, is being used for, so that's really exciting. I've been working on research and this project collectively for about 7 years, so it's a really big deal and it's just really exciting for this all to be put down today and just seeing how it actually works out.
There are many different organizations that have volunteer opportunities to help out with lagoon restoration. And if you want to learn more about those, you can actually go to our website at brevardfl.gov/saveourlagoon, sign up for our monthly newsletter, and we consolidate all those volunteer opportunities and publish those so you won't miss your next chance to help the lagoon.
It's great to have young people involved, especially with science and restoration surrounding our lagoon. And so this is a practical use for this muck, and that's something innovative and new for the lagoon that Marine Resources Council is quite excited about.
The Save Our Indian River Lagoon program is often looking for new technologies to help the lagoon, but you don't have to invent your own technology to help. You can actually go to lagoonloyal.com to find out simple ways that you can do things around your home and business to help reduce pollution to the lagoon.
Cool. Yep. Excellent.
So yeah. So it's great to see students like Sophia getting involved and turning their, science fair projects and other things into applicable, technologies. And our next video that we have took us a while to get this one because it's a lot of coordination with the companies that are taking out these septics, plus the homeowners, getting a homeowner to agree to let us in and film their septic system being removed and or doing quick connects. So this is one of our quick connects. It's to review what a quick connect is. That's those areas that already had a sewer line but are on a septic tank, so we're able to remove the septic and hook them up to that existing sewer line.
So today we're here in Palm Bay launching a Quick Connect. That's where a septic system is being abandoned and a home is being connected to sewer. Now septic systems don't really treat wastewater, they safely put it underground so it's not a sanitary hazard.
There's a lot of problems that septics have. You obviously have to drain your septic numerous times over the years. You have your filters that clog. You have a lot more maintenance costs. And the biggest factor is it releases too much nitrogen in the ground, which internally goes to the groundwater.
And septic systems remove 10 to 40% of the nitrogen that enters them. The rest of that nitrogen flows into the groundwater and then eventually out to the Indian River Lagoon.
So since day one that we moved in here, we've been having problems with the septic. So when the grant came up, I just decided to go ahead and take a chance. It was easy, it was 1, 2, 3.
So Quick Connect is when a customer is on septic and they have the ability to connect to the sewer by their street. We'll come in, drain their tank, crush the top, crush the sides, and then we'll fill it with dirt. Then we'll dig the line to the street and my guys will come through, lay the pipe, and connect to the city's tap.
There are homes throughout the county that are still on septic, but there's a sewer pipe under the street. City's already put them in and they're ready to accept their wastewater. So we're just here to facilitate that process and provide grants, help make it affordable for the homeowners to connect to sewer. So property owners, either commercial or residential, can come to our website or email us at irlproject@brevardfl.gov. Say they're interested in a septic sewer conversion. We can give them the paperwork. They will have to contact their local municipality, make sure that sewer is available. Once we get the completed paperwork approved, we give it back to the homeowner, we give them a notice to proceed. Once that process is complete and they're fully connected to sewer, we can either reimburse the homeowner or we can actually pay their contractors directly so they don't have to come out of pocket for any funds. So currently, Palm Bay is partnering with us, so these Quick Connects are more affordable to the homeowners.
After the home has been connected to sewer, we have inspections. They're gonna come through, make sure everything's pitched right. We're gonna come back and backfill the dirt and then cover it with sod. This process only takes 1 day to complete the whole thing. It's quick in and out and everyone's pretty happy because we're done very fast.
Depending on the connection type, the program can cover most, if not all, of the costs associated with connecting to sewer.
For homeowners who don't have an existing sewer line near them, we also have septic upgrade grants where they can upgrade their system to a system that accomplishes a higher removal of nitrogen. If you want to see if you're eligible for this or any of our grant programs, you can email us at irlproject@brevardfl.gov and we can tell you how much you might be eligible for. For homeowners who can't convert to sewer, there are things they can do to help make their septic work better. So making sure that they are careful what they put down their drains. Don't flush harsh chemicals, flushable wipes, sanitary products, even coffee grounds can upset the balance in a tank and make it work less efficiently. You can also make sure your septic system is operating optimally by getting it pumped out and inspected every 3 to 5 years. If you want to learn other things you can do to help the lagoon, visit lagoonloyal.com for tips and tricks on how to reduce your own pollution at home.
Cool. Great job. I really appreciate all that you're doing on the communication side, and those are fabulous. So. Anything else on those?
Thank you, Daisy, wherever you are, for stepping up and easy 1, 2, 3. That was good.
Okay, so we have no old business or new business, and I'll move to general public comments. I have one card, Steve Hancock.
So, let's see, start my timer now. So I'm Steve Hancock from Sunnyland Beach, and some of the old timers here with staff or on the committee may remember us from a while back. We've been pretty engaged in a lot of this stuff. We're a canal front community, about 6 miles north of the Sebastian Inlet. And if you're one of those people like me who love to draw general conclusions from single data points, our manatees are back. There's 15 manatee hanging out behind my house. At least there's 15 that I can count. You know, there's like the humps or whatever. So anyway, that's one show and tell. The other thing I wanted to this isn't a complaint. It's really just kind of something like of a data point or something to kind of stick in your mind. We've been very active in promoting the septic upgrade program in Sunnyland. I'm not even sure. I think we might actually be like half of the upgrades that have been done in Brevard County, some crazy number. I think we've got now 75 either completed or in process. So it's roughly a third of the homes have converted. And we're always messaging this. I'm on the Property Owners Association. I'm a trustee. I jokingly call myself the Chief Environmental Officer, which is pretty comical if you think about what a tiny little organization that is. Anyway, we're always messaging the community about participation, and it's not just, it's not just sending stuff out either. It's like, I mean, there's a happy hour tonight. I'm sure I'll be talking to people tonight at the happy hour, and other people are talking about it too. So it is kind of an organic thing, but when you actually talk to individual people, that's when you really start to get the pulse. And you get the pulse of realizing what a spectrum of thought processes individual homeowners are at on this stuff. On one extreme, you've got the people who are highly concerned, highly motivated, engaged, driven to action. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who, I'll say, don't care, don't believe, think it's a conspiracy, or combative and will never, just basically don't want to, pursue anything like this at all. The reason I think this is kind of significant, so I was one of the early adopters, and so when you upgrade to an ATU system, you get the privilege of having to operate under a permit. So when you have your old system, it's just like, hey, like you say, you just flush the toilet, nothing, people don't even know a lot of times they have septic systems. So anyway, when you upgrade to one of these, can I have one more minute?
Yes.
When you they say no good deed goes unpunished. I'm not saying that this is the wrong thing to do, because these systems really should be inspected. We just had our inspection. You got a twice-a-year inspection. Septic company comes out, turns some valves, backwashes, does this, that. And you also get to pay the Florida Department of Health in Brevard County $150. Now, I was one of the early people to sign on to the program, so I'm like one of the first people in the neighborhood to get one of these 2-year renewals, because when you first get your upgrade, it's like everything's covered for the first couple of years. But then after that, you're looking at probably $300 a year in expenses that you didn't have before you did the upgrade. In terms of the carrot and the stick, I'm sure everybody's familiar with that term. The $18,000 grant to do the upgrade on the system, that's a carrot. But there's also a stick, and the stick, to some degree, is being held over the people that did the right thing. There doesn't really seem to be much of a stick being held over the people that are just kind of saying, well, the heck with it, I'm not going to do anything. So anyway, it's just kind of food for thought, let's put it that way. But we've got about a third, like I said, we've got about a third of the people that have upgraded. We're pleased to have that. I don't know, I think we're going to get to a point where like each one's going to get harder and harder to persuade or whatever, but we're going to keep at it, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I have one additional card. Sandra Sullivan.
Good morning. Sandra Sullivan, South Patrick Shores. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here earlier. I had a sister to drop off at the airport. I just wanted to revisit this newspaper article that was from December 2015 when then Senator Thad Altman and Representative W. Mayfield proposed a change to the infrastructure surtax in order to make it legal for a proposed muck tax so that it could be used for muck dredging versus capital dredging. That failed in appropriations. So here's my request to this board, and I'm respectfully requesting that you take a vote to request the legal to send off to the Attorney General's office for a legal opinion on the use of the infrastructure surtax for muck dredging, because we're going to go into another cycle of renewing this tax, and that question needs to be, in my opinion, resolved. The second issue I want to bring up is I noticed in the agenda packet that the Satellite Beach dredging project is now 90% through design. And in 2018, there was a large meeting in my community of South Patrick Shores with about 100 people present, where promises were made by the county that that DMAA site that's used for dewatering and interstitial would only be used for the Grand Canal dredging, so not to inconvenience our residents for more years than absolutely necessary. The Grand Canal project was supposed to be done last year in 2023. It's 68% complete, so we're looking at a few more years anyway. So our community is impacted because that project is taking a lot longer. So it would be very unfortunate if a further request was made to put satellite. Now, I'm just going to be perfectly blunt here. When that project was added last year to the Lagoon plan for Satellite Beach, I said, this can't be done for that price, because the DMAA site for that project is with fines down in Palm Bay. So that's a long ways away to transport wet muck. And so I've been fully expecting a bait and switch at the last minute. And I'm just going to say, I'll knock every door in our community and let every single person know if this is moved forward by the county. There is, saw last night on the SPRA website that there is a planned meeting. The county has requested a meeting with our residents in April. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I saw Virginia taking notes on those items. So, thank you. And so I think that wraps up our general public comment. Any final comments from our committee?
Go ahead.
I would just encourage you to go back and look at the video that we saw today from Dr. Fox, and maybe that will have an impact on your decision on muck removal. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
I have one. The Air Force is having 3 open houses in early March about Starship launching from Cape Canaveral, and I grew up watching the space shuttle go off, and it was, as a child, really inspiring. It continues to inspire me, and I think the best way to handle or to address issues that might come up with environmental impact is to get together, talk about it in the beginning, and see if we can get a good solution. And so I think it's March 5th, 6th, and 7th at different places in the county. You can go to Starship Space Force EIS for an environmentally impact survey and .com and get information. But I'm going to go to those meetings because, again, I think it's important that we're at the table in the beginning to make sure that any progress is considered for environmental issues. So just wanted to announce that. Yeah, it's Space Force Starship EIS.com. I think there's also going to be a virtual meeting March 12th, but I think it would be great for us to go and meet those people, make those relations, so they know that the work that we're doing, can fit into what the work they want to be doing.
Excellent. Any other comments before we adjourn?
Yeah, I just like to, I've made a couple requests for presentations, one on muck dredging and just where we are, lessons learned, on costing, just a total kind of presentation on that would be really good. And then also on oysters, where we're at on them. And there's been a lot of oyster reefs put out and over the years, and just how they're doing, where they're doing better, where they're doing best.
Any final comments? So I just have one additional thing. One of the things in my role, I've got the chance to interact with folks from all over the country that are doing a lot of work with whether it's stormwater or wastewater, and I get a chance to talk about some of what the work that's going on here, and it truly is you know, a benchmark for some of the public-private partnerships, leveraging local funds to secure grant funds and some of those kinds of things. So just want to thank the committee for all of the work that you've done, and then particularly the staff as well, because it truly is a benchmark for what can be done working together. And with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.